Hey guys, imagine this. You're a young monk in a dimly lit medieval monastery, the air thick with incense and unspoken sins. You've taken vows of chastity, but the abbot's got a secret chamber where the rules bend like a heretic on the rack. One night, you stumble upon a scene that would make even the devil blush. Clergy entangled in acts so twisted they'd rewrite the Bible just to confess. Welcome to the dark underbelly of holy robes, where piety meets perversion in ways that still haunt our history. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear might make you question if hell was just a medieval HR department. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. The Middle Ages. That glorious era when life expectancy was shorter than a peasant's temper, and the church was the ultimate power broker, doling out salvation like overpriced indulgences at a flea market. But beneath those soaring cathedrals and pious chants lurked a shadow world of sexual depravity among the clergy that would make modern scandals look like playground gossip. We're talking about priests, monks, nuns, and bishops who twisted their vows into pretzels of hypocrisy, all while preaching fire and brimstone to the masses. And oh, the irony! These holy folks, sworn to celibacy since the 11th century's Lateran councils, found ways to sin so creatively that you'd think Satan himself was their muse. But let's not rush. We'll peel back the layers like a leper's bandage, revealing the absurd horrors one festering wound at a time. Picture Europe from the 5th to the 15th century, plagues ravaging villages, knights clanking around in rusty armor, and the church as the glue holding this chaotic mess together. Celibacy wasn't always the rule. Early Christians married like rabbits, but by the High Middle Ages, the Pope decided priests should focus on God, not groping. Spoiler, it didn't work. Instead, it bred an underground culture of forbidden desires, where the pain of repression exploded into acts that blended holiness with horror. Survival back then? A daily gamble against famine, war, and Inquisition's nosy pricks. No wonder the clergy sought solace in the flesh. It was either that or flagellate yourself silly. Let's start with the basics. Clerical concubinage. Sounds fancy, right? Just a priest keeping a housekeeper who mysteriously bore his children. In reality, it was a widespread wink-wink system where bishops turned blind eyes faster than a confessor absolving a donor. Take Pope Alexander VI, that Renaissance rascal. Wait, technically late medieval, but his Borgia antics echo back. He fathered kids left and right, hosting orgies in the Vatican that made Caligula jealous. But rewind to the 12th century. Chroniclers like Gerald of Wales spilled tea on Welsh priests who kept women openly, their offspring scampering around monasteries like holy gremlins. The absurdity? The church fined these sinners but let them keep sinning, turning vice into revenue. Imagine confessing your lust only to pay a fornication tax and carry on. Survival pain? Those women, often peasants, faced social ruin if dumped, birthing bastards in a world where illegitimacy meant begging or worse. But oh, it gets darker. Enter the secret marriages ploy. Clergy couldn't wed officially, so they'd whisper vows in shadowy chapels, consummating in haylofts while rats applauded. Hilarious in hindsight, horrifying then, women trapped in limbo, their husbands vanishing at the first whiff of scandal. One tale from the 13th century, a priest in France married his niece, incest bonus points, and when busted claimed it was all platonic. The bishop laughed it off with a slap on the wrist. Ironic, isn't it? Preaching against adultery while playing house. And the survival angle. In famine-struck villages, these unions meant food security for the woman. But at what cost? Disease, unwanted pregnancies, and the ever-looming threat of excommunication hanging like a noose. Now, let's crank up the sarcasm. Behold the monastic brothels. Monasteries, those bastions of prayer, often doubled as dens of iniquity. Chronicles from the 14th century describe abbeys where monks hosted pilgrims of the female variety, turning cells into love nests. Take the infamous case of the Abbey of Port Royal in France. Nuns and priests mingling in ways that defied gravity and godliness. Absurd? Absolutely. They justify it with twisted theology. The flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. To overlook it, pain of the past, Black Death survivors, already traumatized, seeking comfort in arms that promised heaven but delivered hellish STDs. Syphilis wasn't rampant yet, but gonorrhea and other delights festered in those damp cloisters. Diving deeper, we hit sodomy scandals, the church's ultimate taboo, yet rampant among all male orders. Pope Gregory IX in the 13th century railed against clerical sodomites, but enforcement was a joke. Stories abound of bishops like Odo of Cluny decrying monks who burned with unnatural lust, yet his own abbey was a hotbed. Ironic twist, the same church that burned heretics at the stake for less turned a blind eye to internal buggery, as long as it stayed hushed. Historical absurdity peaks here, vows of poverty, chastity, obedience broken in orgiastic frenzy. Survival? In isolated monasteries, loneliness gnawed like hunger. These acts were desperate grasps at humanity amid vows that dehumanized. But wait, there's more grotesque flair. The penitential practices that blurred pain and pleasure. Flagellation wasn't just self-punishment. Groups like the flagellants whipped each other in ecstatic rituals, sometimes escalating to erotic frenzy. Imagine, barebacks lashed in public squares, moans echoing like twisted hymns. Sarcasm alert, nothing says holy like BDSM before it was cool. And the horror? Infections from open wounds in an era without antibiotics. Survival meant enduring sepsis for salvation's sake. Shifting to nuns, oh the poor sisters. Convents were supposed to be sanctuaries, but priests often visited for spiritual guidance. The 12th century tale of Eloise and Abelard, romantic on paper, but Abelard's castration highlights the brutal backlash. Nuns faced forced abortions or infanticide if pregnancies showed. Absurd, since the church preached life's sanctity. One chronicler notes a convent where the abbess ran a secret birthing ward, smuggling babies out. Ironic pain, women fleeing worldly sins only to find worse behind walls. Survival? Many entered convents to escape poverty or rape, yet found predators and collars. Let's not forget the Crusades' sexual undercurrents. Knights Templar, those chivalric heroes, faced accusations of ritual sodomy and initiations, kissing navels, spitting on crosses, the works. Philip IV's 1307 purge, politically motivated, but whispers of orgies in Holy Land outposts persist. Absurdity, fighting infidels by day, indulging by night. Horror, captured crusaders face castration or worse, mirroring their own hypocrisies. Now, pedal back to papal excesses. Innocent III in the 13th century convened the Fourth Lateran Council to curb clerical vice, but popes like John XII, the pornocracy era, turned the Lateran palace into a brothel. John allegedly slept with his mother, sisters, family reunions gone wrong. Sarcastic nudge, leadership by example folks, survival in Rome, a viper's nest of intrigue where sex was currency and disease the interest. Venturing into mysticism's dark side, bridal mysticism where nuns envision Christ as lover, sometimes manifesting in physical acts with priests as proxies. Hildegard of Bingen wrote of divine unions, but lesser mystics twisted it into orgies. Ironic, seeking God through the very flesh denied. Pain, self-induced visions via starvation, leading to hallucinations and health collapses. And the witch hunt's prelude, clerical fears of female sexuality projecting onto accusations. Priests bedding witches, then burning them to cover tracks. Absurd horror, the Malleus Maleficarum penned by inquisitors obsessed with demonic copulation. Survival? Women accused faced torture, confessing impossibilities to end pain. Let's spice with specifics. The 14th century English bishop Henry Despenser accused of raping nuns during his visits. Or the German monk who kept a harem in his cell, justifying with multiplication of the faithful. Sarcasm, because nothing says. Devotion, like a personal convent, dipping into folklore, tales of succubi visiting clergy, but really it was excuses for wet dreams or affairs. Church manuals detailed exorcisms for such possessions, involving intimate rituals that sound suspiciously erotic. Ironic absurdity, battling demons with more sin. Now, the economic angle, prostitution rings run by clergy. In Avignon during the Babylonian captivity, popes taxed brothels while priests pimped. Survival pain, peasants sold daughters to holy houses for bread, perpetuating cycles of abuse, escalating to bestiality whispers. rare but documented in penitentials like Burchard of Worms, prescribing penances for animal liaisons. Horrifying, yes. Absurd? In livestock scarce times, desperation bred madness. In castration cults, some sects self-mutilated for purity, like the Skoptsi precursors, but medieval clergy sometimes forced it on rivals. Pain of survival. Eunuch priests, emasculated yet lustful, channeling rage into inquisitions, weaving in viewer engagement. Hey, if this is twisting your gut, drop a comment. What's the most shocking historical fact you've heard? Does it make you glad for modern times? Pushing further, the two-backed beast euphemisms in literature like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, where the friar beds wives for alms. Sarcastic, charity begins at home or in bed. Monastic reforms like Cluny tried cleaning house, but corruption boomeranged. Abbot Peter the Venerable lamented monks fornicating like beasts. Ironic, reforms birthing more scandals. Now, transatlantic echoes, though medieval Europe focused, Viking raids brought slave concubines to Irish monasteries, blending pagan rites with Christian sin. Diving into artifacts, illuminated manuscripts with marginalia depicting clergy in lewd poses, monks drawing their own downfalls, absurd self-awareness, and the Black Death's aftermath. With populations decimated, clergy recruitment dropped, leading to lax standards and more vice. Survival horror, orphans entering orders preyed upon by elders. Specific case, the 15th century Council of Basel debating clerical celibacy, but conservatives won, perpetuating the mess. Ironic, debates in chambers where mistresses waited outside. Nuns' rebellions. Some convents became lesbian havens as per inquisitorial records, sisters finding solace in each other amid male oppression. Pain. Discovery meant walls, or worse. Papal bastards, many rose to power like Cesare Borgia, embodying nepotism's nadir. Sarcastic, family values, medieval style. Winding this part, the medieval clergy's sexual horrors weren't just personal failings, they were systemic abscesses in a church claiming moral monopoly. Absurdity in vows unbreakable yet shattered daily. Irony in preaching purity while wallowing in filth. Pain in survivors' silent sufferings. As we pause here, remember, the past isn't dead, it haunts us with lessons wrapped in nightmare. Stay tuned for part 2, where we unearth even deeper crypts of depravity. What do you think so far? Comment below if you'd confess these sins or burn the confessor. Alright, buckle up, because we're diving back into the cesspool of medieval clergy's sexual escapades, part 2 of our grim, sarcastic journey through the holy horrors of the Middle Ages. If you thought part 1 was a wild ride, brace yourself. We're about to crank the absurdity dial to 11, peel back more layers of hypocrisy, and expose the survival nightmares that made these sins both desperate and depraved. Let's wade through the muck, shall we? Picture a 13th century cathedral town, its spires piercing the heavens while the clergy below pierce, well, everything else. The church, that grand arbiter of souls, was a paradox wrapped in a riddle, soaked in wine and sin. Celibacy was the golden rule, but for many priests, monks, and nuns, it was more like a golden suggestion, ignored with the enthusiasm of a peasant dodging taxes. The sheer creativity of their transgressions would make a modern tabloid editor weep with envy. So let's stroll through this medieval red light district of the divine, where vows were as flexible as a harlot's morals. First up, the bizarre phenomenon of spiritual fornication. Oh yes, the clergy didn't just break their vows, they sanctified their sins with theological acrobatics. Mystics like Mechthild of Magdeburg wrote of divine embraces with Christ, but some priests took this literally, claiming their dalliances were holy reenactments. Imagine Father Bernard, sweating in his robes, whispering to a village maiden, "This is just us communing with the divine, my dear." Ironic? The church preached spiritual purity while its agents turned bedrooms into altars. The survival pain? Women, often coerced, faced exile or death if they spilled the beans, while the priest got a stern sermon and a new parish. Now, let's talk about the sin markets of medieval cities. Prostitution was a booming trade, and guess who was often running the show? Clergy. In 14th century London, the Bishop of Winchester owned brothels in Southwark, nicknamed the Stews. These holy landlords collected rent from sex workers while preaching against lust on Sundays. The absurdity: they'd absolve their tenants' sins for a fee, turning the confessional into a cash register. Survival horror: Those sex workers, often orphans or widows, had no choice. Starve or serve. Syphilis wasn't named yet, but its ancestors ravaged bodies, and the church's cut of the profits ensured the cycle spun on. Diving into monasteries, we find the cellarer's secret. The cellarer, tasked with managing supplies, often doubled as the abbey's pimp. Chronicles from Germany detail monks sneaking women into cellars, where wine barrels hid more than just booze. One tale from a Bavarian monastery. The abbot caught wind but joined in, turning the place into a medieval speakeasy. Sarcasm alert. Nothing says vow of poverty like a monk hosting a bacchanal. The pain? Monks, isolated and half-starved, sought escape in flesh, but diseases like leprosy lurked in those dank walls, turning pleasure into punishment. Let's pivot to the nunneries, because oh boy, the sisters weren't sitting idly with their rosaries. Some convents became hotbeds of scandal, with nuns engaging in what inquisitors delicately called unnatural acts. A 13th century record from Italy describes a convent where the prioress ran a side hustle, arranging trysts with local clergy. The kicker? When caught, she claimed it was charitable outreach. Ironic brilliance, saving souls by damning bodies. Survival stakes. Many nuns were noble women dumped in convents to save dowries. Trapped, they rebelled in the only way they could, risking torture if exposed. Now, the clergy's obsession with relics, holy bones and bits, took a perverse turn. Some priests peddled miraculous relics to fund their vices. A finger of Saint whoever, 5 shillings and a night with the buyer's sister. In France, a monk was caught selling fake relics to finance his mistress's wardrobe. Absurd? You bet, turning sacred into sordid. The horror, pilgrims desperate for miracles bankrupted themselves while the church's relic trade fueled debauchery. Let's spice it with bestiality's grim shadow. Penitential books, like those of Theodore of Tarsus, list penances for clergy caught with livestock. 7 years on bread and water for a sheep, 10 for a cow. The fact that they needed specific penalties tells you it happened enough to codify. Sarcastic nudge. Nothing screams holy shepherd like taking it literally. Survival pain. In rural parishes, isolation and poverty drove men to madness, and animals were easier to silence than humans. Cranking up the irony. The church's own laws enabled the chaos. Canon law allowed priests to keep concubines if they paid a fine, essentially a sin subscription. In Spain, bishops' ledgers show concubinage fees as a steady income stream. Imagine confessing your affair, slipping the bishop a coin, and getting a pat on the back. The horror? Those fines funded wars and cathedrals, built on the backs of exploited women and shamed bastards. Let's zoom into a juicy scandal. The 12th century case of the Bishop of Liege, who turned his palace into a pleasure dome. Chronicles describe feasts where clergy and courtesans mingled, with minstrels singing bawdy hymns. When reformers stormed in, the bishop fled, leaving behind a trail of illegitimate heirs. Absurdity, he claimed it was pastoral care. Pain, the children, branded as sinners, faced lives of scorn, while the bishop slunk to a new diocese. Now, the penitential orgies. Yes, they're as bad as they sound. Some clergy turned self-flagellation into group affairs, stripping down in candlelit crypts, whipping each other into frenzies that blurred pain and pleasure. A 14th century account from Flanders describes monks and nuns purifying together, their screams mistaken for demonic possession. Ironic, seeking salvation through sadomasochism. Survival horror. Open wounds invited infections, and the Black Death didn't care if you were moaning for God or otherwise. Dipping into the Crusades again, the military orders, like the Hospitallers, faced rumors of ritualized debauchery. Captured knights confessed, under torture mind you, to sodomy and orgies in desert fortresses. True or not, the whispers fueled purges, with Philip IV burning Templars at the stake. Absurd, accusing celibate warriors of lust to seize their wealth. Pain, innocents roasted while the real sinners sipped wine in Rome. Let's not skip the child oblates, the kids given to monasteries as offerings. By adolescence, some became prey for older clergy. A 13th century reformer, Bernard of Clairvaux, raged against monks grooming novices, but his own order wasn't clean. Sarcastic twist, teaching scripture by day, twisting it by night. Survival nightmare, those kids with no family or escape endured in silence, their trauma buried under chants. engaging the audience. Hey, what's the wildest medieval tale you've come across? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if you can top these horrors. Now, the papal harems. Popes like Benedict IX, dubbed the demon from hell by contemporaries, allegedly kept male and female lovers in the Lateran. His orgies were so notorious, he was deposed, then reinstated because medieval politics. Ironic, the Vicar of Christ moonlighting as a libertine. Pain. Courtiers and servants, complicit or coerced, lived in fear of betrayal or disease. Shifting to the economic angle, church-run brothels weren't just urban. Rural parishes had alehouse nuns, women paid to entertain visiting clergy. In England, records show priests doubling as tavern pimps, their churches mere fronts. Absurdity, preaching temperance while pouring sin. Horror, those women, often serfs, faced violence and abandonment when their protectors moved on. Diving into mysticism again, some clergy used visions to justify affairs. A 14th century French priest claimed his lover was the Virgin Mary reincarnate, seducing half the village before the Inquisition caught up. Sarcastic gold, divine revelations as pickup lines. Survival pain, the women, branded heretics, faced flames while the priest got penance. In the witch hunt's roots, clergy projecting their lust onto demonic women. The 13th century push against sorcery saw priests accusing former lovers to save face. A German nun, caught with a monk, was burned as a witch, her partner reassigned. Ironic horror, the church's paranoia consumed its own. Specific case, the 15th century Archbishop of Mainz, who fathered a dozen kids, each baptized in his cathedral. When reformers called him out, he claimed it was spreading God's love. Absurdity at its peak. Monastic love potions add flavor. Clergy dabbled in alchemy, brewing concoctions to seduce. A 12th century text lists recipes using herbs and, gross alert, bodily fluids. Sarcasm, nothing says romance like a monk's special sauce. Pain, poisonings were common, as potions turned deadly. And the sinful pilgrimages, clergy led flocks to shrines only to detour through brothels. Chaucer's pardoner would have blushed. Survival horror. Pilgrims, fleeced of savings, returned home with diseases, not blessings. Reforms? Laughable. The Gregorian reforms of the 11th century tried enforcing celibacy, but priests just got sneakier. By the 15th century, the Council of Constance admitted defeat, noting fornication is inevitable. Ironic capitulation, folklore twist, tales of monk devils seducing villagers, only to reveal human collars under horns. Absurd cover for real crimes. Winding down. This era's sexual practices weren't just scandals. They were symptoms of a system rotten to its core. The church wielded power, but its clergy wielded desire, twisting faith into farce. The pain of survival drove these acts, but the absurdity of holy hypocrisy made them legendary. Stay tuned for part 3, where we dig into even murkier corners. Comment below. Would you rather face a medieval priest or a modern lawyer? Let's debate. Welcome back to our twisted pilgrimage through the medieval clergy's house of horrors, where the line between saint and sinner was blurrier than a monk's vision after a barrel of ale. We're now at part 3, and if you thought the last 2 dives were wild, prepare for a descent into even murkier depths of holy debauchery. The Middle Ages gave us cathedrals that scraped the heavens, but down below, the clergy were scraping the bottom of morality's barrel with a gusto that'd make a Viking blush. Let's wade into this cesspit of irony, absurdity, and survival's raw pain, where every vow broken was a sermon in hypocrisy. Imagine a foggy 14th century village, the church bell tolling like a grim metronome. Inside, the priest isn't praying, he's tangled in a tryst that'd make the Virgin Mary clutch her rosary. Celibacy, that grand experiment of the church, was less a rule and more a dare, and oh, did the clergy take it up with flair. From popes to parish priests, they turned sacred spaces into playgrounds of sin, all while preaching salvation to peasants who could barely afford bread. The absurdity? They weren't just sinning, they were rewriting the rule book on creative depravity. So let's crack open this 3rd chapter of holy chaos. Let's kick off with the holy harems of the higher-ups. Bishops and cardinals, those shepherds of souls, often kept entourages that rivaled a sultan's court. Take the 13th century Cardinal Hugo of Ostia, who reportedly housed a dozen mistresses in his palace, each dressed as a nun for discretion. The irony? He penned treatises on chastity while his nuns raised his brood. Survival pain. Those women, often lowborn, were trapped, dependent on his whims, discarded when scandals brewed, facing destitution or worse in a world that shunned fallen women. Now shift to the confessional seductions. The confessional box, meant for purging sins, doubled as a pickup spot. Priests, armed with intimate secrets, coerced penitents into acts framed as penance. A 14th century Italian chronicle tells of Father Lorenzo, who absolved women only after private counseling in his chambers. Sarcastic gold. Nothing cleanses the soul like a priest's wandering hands. The horror? Women, fearing eternal damnation, complied, only to face pregnancies and social ruin in an era where a bastard child meant starvation or slavery. Let's venture into the pilgrimage rackets. Pilgrimages to shrines like Compostela were spiritual journeys, but some clergy turned them into pleasure cruises. Priests led groups through brothel-lined routes, pocketing kickbacks from tavern keepers. A 12th century account describes a monk who blessed pilgrims with wine and women, claiming it was God's hospitality. Absurdity at its peak. Salvation via sin with a holy stamp of approval. Survival stakes. Pilgrims, often fleeing plague or famine, spent their last coins only to return with diseases no prayer could cure. Diving into the cloisters, we find monastic matchmakers. Some abbots played Cupid, pairing monks with local women for profit. In Germany, a 15th century monastery ran a matchmaking service where wealthy widows paid for spiritual companionship. The kicker? The monks pocketed dowries while the women got empty promises. Ironic twist, vows of poverty funded lavish orgies. Pain. Those widows seeking security were left penniless when the monks moved on, their reputations shredded in a society that valued chastity over survival. Now, the indulgences for indulgence scam. Selling indulgences, get-out-of-hell cards, was a church cash cow, but some clergy took it further, offering absolution for sexual favors. In France, a priest named Giles traded pardons for nights with noble women, his ledger listing sins forgiven next to bedroom tallies. Sarcastic nudge. Why pay coin when you can pay in kind? Horror. Those women, often coerced, faced blackmail. Spill the secret, and you're excommunicated, a fate worse than death in a God-fearing world. Let's touch on the sacred sadomasochism trend. Flagellation, meant to mortify the flesh, often turned into group kink fests. In 14th century Spain, a sect of monks whipped each other in candlelit crypts, their cries blending pain and ecstasy. One chronicler noted nuns joining in, their penance ending in embraces. Absurd, whipping for God, groping for glory. Survival pain, open wounds and filthy conditions bred infections, turning spiritual zeal into septic agony. Shifting to the child bride loophole, clergy couldn't marry, but some took wards, young girls raised in convents, betrothed in secret. A 13th century English bishop adopted a teen orphan, only to wed her in a clandestine rite. When she bore his child, he shipped her to a remote nunnery. Ironic, protecting her soul by ruining her life. Horror. Those girls, with no voice, faced childbirth without care, often dying in labor while the priest preached on. Now, the demonic dalliance's excuse. Clergy caught in affairs blamed succubi, seductive demons who conveniently took the fall. A 14th century French monk claimed a succubus visited nightly, forcing him into sin. The truth? His lover was the miller's daughter. Sarcastic gem. Blaming Satan for a fling is peak medieval PR. Pain. The women, labeled witches, faced torture, while the monk got a slap on the wrist. Let's explore the holy brothels of Avignon. During the 14th century papal schism, Avignon's popes ran a sin city, taxing brothels while clergy moonlighted as bouncers. One pope, Clement VI, allegedly kept a courtesan court, calling it diplomatic outreach. Absurdity, the vicar of Christ as pimp-in-chief. Survival horror. Sex workers, often refugees, faced violence and disease, their earnings funneled to papal wars. Dipping into the relic racket's dark side, some clergy used fake relics to lure women. A 12th century monk sold virgins' tears that guaranteed fertility, betting buyers to seal the miracle. Ironic, miracles for sale, delivered in the flesh. Pain. Infertile women, desperate for children, faced heartbreak when the scam failed, their savings gone. Now, the sodomy networks in monasteries. All male orders bred clandestine relationships, often ignored unless political enemies sniffed them out. A 13th century Italian abbey was purged when a rival bishop exposed its brotherhood of love. Sarcastic twist, brotherly love, just a bit too literal. Horror, accused monks faced torture, their lovers burned as heretics, all to settle scores. Specific scandal, the 14th century abbot of Jumièges, who turned his abbey into a pleasure palace. Chronicles describe feasts where monks and courtesans danced, the abbot preaching while half naked. When reformers intervened, he bribed his way out. Absurdity, salvation through seduction. Pain, the courtesans, discarded post-scandal, begged in streets ravaged by plague. Let's hit the nun runners. Some priests smuggled nuns from convents for illicit affairs, promising freedom. A 15th century German case saw a priest rescue a nun, only to abandon her pregnant in a forest. Ironic, liberation into limbo. Survival stakes, she faced starvation or execution, while he slunk back to his altar. Engaging you folks, what's the craziest historical loophole you've heard of? Drop it in the comments, let's see if it beats these clerical cons. Now, the papal pageants of sin. Popes like John the 23rd threw bacchanals that shocked even Rome. His 15th century parties featured clergy and courtesans in mock religious rites. Think Black Mass, but with better wine. Sarcastic gold, consecrating sin with a papal wink. Horror, servants coerced into joining face disease or death, their silence bought with threats. And the love spells trade. Clergy dabbled in occult-tinged seduction, selling charms laced with herbs or worse. A 13th century English priest's love potion killed a noble woman, sparking a riot. Absurd, magic for lust, murder by mistake. Pain. The priest fled, but the woman's family lost everything in the fallout. The crusader concubines add spice. Returning knights gifted clergy with enslaved women from the Holy Land who became secret mistresses. A 12th century chronicle notes a bishop with a Saracen harem, baptized for show. Ironic, converting souls while corrupting bodies. Survival pain. Those women, torn from home, faced abuse in a foreign land. Monastic art gets a nod. Manuscripts with lewd drawings, monks sketching their fantasies in sacred texts. A 14th century psalter shows a priest and nun in a compromising pose, captioned Alleluia. Absurdity at its finest. Reforms, a sick joke. The 15th century Council of Florence tried cracking down, but clergy just hid their sins better. Ironic, the church policing itself like a fox guarding hens. Winding down, these practices weren't just scandals. They were the dark heartbeat of a system that preached heaven but practiced hell. The absurdity of holy men sinning with zeal, the irony of salvation sold for sex, the pain of survivors crushed by power. These are the medieval church's true relics. Stay tuned for the final part, where we unearth the last crypts of this nightmare. Comment below. Would you trust a medieval priest with your soul or your wallet? Let's hear it. Here we are, at the grand finale of our sordid saga through the medieval clergy's sexual underworld. A place where halos were tarnished, vows were vapor, and the line between divine and depraved was as thin as a monk's patience after Lent. This is part 4, and we're going all in, dragging the last skeletons from the church's closet with a smirk and a shudder. The Middle Ages were a circus of faith and filth, where priests, nuns, and popes turned celibacy into a performance art of hypocrisy. So, let's light the last candle, crack open the crypt, and revel in the absurdity, irony, and gut-wrenching pain of survival in this holy house of horrors. Picture a 15th century monastery, its stone walls echoing with chants by day and moans by night. The church, that towering beacon of morality, was less a lighthouse and more a brothel with better architecture. Celibacy, enforced since the 11th century, was a rule honored more in its breach than its observance, with clergy crafting sins so inventive they'd make a demon take notes. As we close this journey, we'll unearth the final scandals, from papal perversions to peasant betrayals, all laced with the bitter truth of a world where survival meant bending until you broke. Let's start with the papal pleasure palaces. By the late Middle Ages, Rome was less the eternal city and more the eternal party. Popes like Sixtus IV turned the Vatican into a den of vice, hosting banquets where clergy and courtesans mingled in ways that'd make Nero jealous. Sixtus, dubbed the patron of sin, allegedly funded his nephew's orgies while preaching against lust. The irony? His indulgences, literal and figurative, built St. Peter's Basilica. Survival pain. Courtesans, often trafficked from war-torn regions, faced disease and abandonment, their lives a gamble for a pope's favor. Now, the sacred blackmail game. Priests, privy to confessions, wielded secrets like daggers. In 14th century England, a priest named Thomas used his flock's sins to coerce noble women into bed, threatening to leak their confessions. When one resisted, he excommunicated her, ruining her family. Sarcastic gem. Nothing says pastoral care like spiritual extortion. Horror. Those women shunned by society faced starvation or prostitution, while Thomas collected alms and alibis. Diving into convents, we find sisterly sins. Some nunneries, like one in 13th century Spain, became enclaves of forbidden love between sisters. Inquisitors, sniffing scandal, recorded tales of nuns caught in passionate embraces, their vows of chastity twisted into defiance. Ironic twist, seeking God's love, they found each other's only to face torture for it. Survival stakes. Many nuns, forced into convents by families dodging dowries, rebelled against a system that caged them, risking death for a moment's freedom. Let's explore the relic orgies. Relics, bones, hair, or bits of saints, were big business, but some clergy used them as bait. A 15th century French monk offered touches of a saint's finger to women, followed by touches of his own. The kicker? His relics were chicken bones, absurdity, faking miracles to score. Pain, desperate pilgrims seeking cures, lost savings and dignity, contracting diseases in the process. Now, the Crusaders' concubine pipeline. As crusades waned, returning knights sold captive women to clergy, who kept them as servants. A 13th century chronicle describes a bishop in Sicily with a harem of Muslim women, baptized to dodge suspicion. Sarcastic nudge, converting souls, one bed at a time. Horror. Those women, torn from families, faced slavery and abuse, their conversion a cruel facade. Shifting to the monastic menageries, we hit bestiality's grim fringe. Penitential texts, like those of Egbert of York, list penances for clergy caught with animals. 3 years for a goat, 5 for a horse. The fact they needed a sliding scale screams absurdity. Survival pain. In remote parishes, isolation drove men to madness. Their sins a desperate cry against loneliness in a world where plague could claim you tomorrow. Let's talk holy hustlers. Some priests ran prostitution rings under the guise of charity. In 14th century Florence, a friar organized almshouses that doubled as brothels, with nuns as overseers. Prophets funded church repairs, while the women, often orphans, were trapped. Ironic, building God's house on broken lives. Horror. Those women, promised salvation, faced violence and disease, their bodies sold for sacred coin. Now, the child oblate tragedy deepens. Young boys and girls gifted to monasteries were vulnerable to predators. A 12th century German abbot was caught grooming novices teaching special prayers in his cell. When exposed, he claimed demonic possession. Sarcastic gold, blaming Satan for a hands-on approach. Pain. Those children with no escape carry trauma into adulthood, their silence enforced by fear. Engaging you all. What's the most shocking medieval scam you've heard? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if it tops these holy hustles. Let's hit the penitential parties. Flagellation groups like the 14th century Brethren of the Cross turned public whippings into erotic spectacles. Monks and nuns, half naked, lashed each other in town squares, their moans drawing crowds. Absurd? Salvation through sadomasochism with an audience. Survival horror. Open wounds in plague-ridden towns invited gangrene, turning penance into a death sentence. Now, the papal bastard's legacy. Many popes fathered children who rose to power, like Innocent the Eighth son who became a cardinal. Ironic, nepotism in the name of God. Pain. Those children, legitimized by wealth, faced assassination plots from jealous rivals, their lives a gilded cage. Dipping into love charms, clergy sold aphrodisiacs laced with dangerous herbs. A 13th century Spanish priest's potion caused a noble woman's miscarriage, sparking a feud. Sarcastic twist, spreading love, one poison at a time. Horror, families torn apart while the priest fled to a new parish. The witch hunt warm-up ties in. Clergy, fearing exposure, accuse lovers of witchcraft. A 15th century English nun caught with a priest was burned as a sorceress, her lover reassigned. Ironic, saving his soul by damning hers. Survival pain. Women, defenseless, face torture, their confessions coerced under agony. Specific case. The 14th century Bishop of Troy who turned his cathedral into a brothel. Chronicles describe masses where clergy and courtesans mingled, the altar draped in silk. When reformers stormed in, he bribed them with relic profits. Absurdity, worshipping lust on holy ground. Pain, the courtesans, discarded post-scandal, begged in streets ravaged by war. Let's touch monastic manuscripts. Some monks illustrated psalters with explicit scenes. Nuns and priests in compromising poses captioned with prayers. A 15th century French codex shows a monk and maiden under Benedictus. Sarcastic gem, illuminating sin in sacred ink. Horror. These texts, meant for devotion, became outlets for repressed desire. The pilgrimage pimps add flavor. Clergy led pilgrims to shrines, detouring through taverns where women waited. A 13th century monk in Canterbury ran a side hustle, matching pilgrims with guides. Ironic, guiding souls to sin. Pain, pilgrims fleeced of coin returned with STDs, their faith shattered. Reforms, a cruel jest. The 15th century Council of Basel debated celibacy, but clergy doubled down, hiding mistresses in attics. Ironic, policing vice while practicing it. Absurdity, bishops preaching reform while bedding chambermaids. Folklore twist, tales of priest goblins seducing villagers only to vanish at dawn. Really, they were clergy dodging accountability. Sarcastic nudge, supernatural alibis for earthly sins. Now, the convent escapes. Some nuns, fed up, fled with lovers, often priests. A 14th century Italian case saw a nun and monk elope, only to be caught and walled up alive. Ironic, love as a death sentence. Horror, their punishment, meant to deter, only fueled rebellion. The indulgences racket ties it up. Clergy sold pardons for sins they committed, like a 15th century German friar who absolved his own affairs for coin. Absurd, sinning and selling forgiveness in one breath. Pain, peasants bled dry, faced famine while the church grew fat. Closing this saga, the medieval clergy's sexual practices were a grotesque tapestry of power, lust, and betrayal. The absurdity of preaching purity while wallowing in vice, the irony of salvation through sin, the pain of survivors crushed by a system that sanctified abuse. These are the true relics of the era. As we leave this nightmare, reflect, the past's horrors echo in today's shadows, a reminder to question those who claim divine authority. Thanks for joining this wild ride. Comment below. What's the one medieval sin you'd confess to? Let's end with a laugh and a shudder. Imagine this. You're cozy in your modern home, scrolling through history memes, when suddenly, bam, DNA drops a bombshell. Native Americans didn't just stroll over from one tidy migration. Oh no, it was a chaotic parade of ancient wanderers, dodging ice ages, hungry beasts, and each other, all to claim a continent that would later get discovered by some guy with bad navigation skills. Stick around, because we're diving into this genetic roller coaster with enough irony to make Columbus blush. And hey, if you're as shocked as I am, drop a comment below. What's the wildest migration story you've heard? Let's unpack this absurdity. Picture the scene tens of thousands of years ago. The world is a frozen hellscape, courtesy of the last glacial maximum. Glaciers are hogging North America like greedy landlords, and sea levels are so low you could practically walk from Siberia to Alaska without getting your feet wet. Enter the first wave of migrants, tough as nails Siberian nomads, probably bundled in fur coats that smelled like mammoth sweat. They're not thinking, hey, let's found a new world. Nah, they're just following the food, reindeer, bison, whatever's not frozen solid. But here's the irony. These folks are the original road trippers crossing Beringia, that now sunken land bridge, without a single GPS or rest stop. Survival? Pure pain. One wrong step, and you're a saber-toothed tiger chow. Or worse, you freeze to death mid-hunt, your last thought being, why didn't we stay home and eat berries? DNA tells us this wasn't a one-and-done deal. Oh, the hubris of early archaeologists who clung to the Clovis first theory like it was gospel. One migration 13,000 years ago, end of story, they said, but genomes laugh in their faces. Modern Native American DNA shows branches, multiple roots twisting back to ancient Asia. First group, probably around 25,000 years ago, hunkering down in Beringia for millennia, evolving in isolation while the ice walls blocked their path. Imagine the boredom, generations stuck in a glacial waiting room, telling stories around fires made from whatever bones they could scavenge. Grandpa, when do we get to the promised land? Soon, kids, soon after this ice melts or we all starve. Then, breakthrough. Around 16,000 years ago, the ice cracks open. Coastal routes thaw, inland corridors appear like divine invitations. Wave 1 charges south, splitting into branches that would become the ancestors of most native peoples from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego. But wait, DNA whispers secrets of more. In 2015, scientists sequenced genomes from ancient bones and living descendants, revealing a ghost population. Yeah, that's right, an extra lineage, maybe from a separate migration, mixing in like an uninvited guest at a family reunion. These folks carried genes hinting at Australasian ties, like distant cousins from Papua New Guinea crashing the Siberian party. How? Maybe a Pacific hopscotch, island to island, or some wild detour across the ocean. Absurd? Absolutely. Painful. Imagine braving open seas in rickety canoes, waves taller than mountains, sharks eyeing you like sushi. One storm, and poof, your whole clan vanishes into the deep, forgotten until some lab tech in Copenhagen spots your DNA echo in an Amazonian tribe. Let's zoom in on the absurdity. These migrants aren't heroes in capes. They're desperate survivors in a world that hates them. Take the coastal route theory. Kelp highways, they call it now. Picture families paddling along the Pacific Rim, feasting on seaweed and shellfish, dodging tsunamis and orcas. Honey, pass the abalone. Oh wait, that's a killer whale. Irony piles on. While they're innovating boat tech that would make modern yacht owners jealous, back in Asia, their relatives are probably lounging by rivers, wondering where Uncle Og went. And the pain? Starvation stalks them, berries gone bad, hunts failed, kids crying, elders sacrificing themselves so the young eat. It's a nightmare lottery, survive the crossing or become a statistic in the fossil record. But DNA doesn't stop at 2 waves. Oh no, it's got layers, like an onion that makes historians cry. Enter the Na-Dene speakers, Athabascans, Navajo, Apache. Their genes scream latecomers. Around 5,000 to 9,000 years ago, another pulse from Siberia, maybe via the same bridge or ice-free paths. These guys bring new tools, new languages, new blood. Imagine the culture clash. Original inhabitants eyeing these newcomers like, who invited you? We've been here forever. Fights ensue, alliances form, genes mix in a tango of survival. Absurdity alert. While Eurasians are building pyramids and inventing wheels, these migrants are reinventing society from scratch, all while fending off megafauna that could squash them like bugs. Pain? Endless. Diseases unknown, injuries without antibiotics. A broken leg means death or dragging yourself for miles hoping your tribe doesn't leave you behind. And don't get me started on the Inuit and Aleut branches. Their DNA points to yet another migration around 5,000 years ago, sweeping across the Arctic like a frozen blitzkrieg. These Paleo-Eskimos, as we call them, adapt to blizzards that would kill lesser folk in hours. Harpooning whales from kayaks? Building igloos that laugh at minus 50 degrees? Genius, but laced with irony. Their tech is so advanced, yet they're isolated. Genes bottlenecking into uniqueness. Survival's pain hits hard. Frostbite claims fingers. Starvation winters where the sun forgets to rise. Families huddle, sharing body heat, whispering tales of warmer lands they'll never see. DNA links them back to Siberia too, but with twists, admixtures that hint at even older divergences. It's like the genome's playing a prank. Thought it was simple? Ha! Here's another layer. Now, let's talk South America, the real wild card. DNA from the Amazon reveals signals from ancient Australasians, folks related to modern Andaman Islanders or Aboriginal Australians. How the hell did that happen? Theories abound. A trans-Pacific voyage 15,000 years ago, predating Polynesians by millennia, or a coastal creep around the Pacific Rim, genes hitchhiking like viral memes. Absurd, right? Imagine Polynesian-like sailors veering off course, landing in Chile, mixing with locals before vanishing into legend. Painful reality. Oceans are merciless. Storms swallow boats whole. Currents drag you to doom. Survivors wash up starved, rebuilding from nothing, their stories lost until a cheek swab in 2020 revives them. Engage with me here. Pause the video if you need to, but comment. If you could time travel to one of these migrations, which wave would you join and why? The Siberian trekkers, the coastal paddlers, or the Arctic conquerors? Your answers might reveal your inner survivor. Diving deeper, DNA isn't just about arrivals, it's about the horrors in between. The bottleneck effect, populations crash, genes narrow. One study on ancient DNA from Montana shows a group so isolated, inbreeding was a risk. Irony, they're free in a vast land, yet trapped by geography. Pain? Genetic diseases creep in, vulnerabilities to new bugs. When Europeans arrive later, spoiler, that's part 2's nightmare, these narrow genes make smallpox a genocide machine. But for now, focus on the absurdity of adaptation. Clovis points, those fluted spears, masterpieces for mammoth hunting. Yet, overhunting leads to extinction cascades. Great job, guys, we killed all the big game. Now what? Cue the pivot to smaller prey, agriculture experiments in harsh soils. Let's humanize this. Imagine a young woman in the first wave. Call her Ayla for kicks. She's crossing Beringia, pregnant, feet blistered from endless marches. Her clan's elder dies from a fall. No burial, just left for wolves, because carrying dead weight means you join them. Absurdity. She's got dreams of green valleys, but reality's ice and starvation. Pain surges when her child is born weak, surviving on milk from a mother who's barely eating. Yet, she presses on, her DNA threading through millennia to modern Cherokee or Inca descendants. Sarcasm drips. Thanks, evolution, for making survival a cosmic joke. More science irony. The 2018 study in Nature, sequencing 15 ancient genomes from across the Americas. Boom, confirmation of a single founding population splitting early, but with admixtures, no pure lines, it's a genetic melting pot from day one. Absurd that we ever thought otherwise. Pain in the data, bones from mass graves, hints of violence between groups, migrants clashing over resources, arrows fly, blood stains the tundra. Survival's not poetic, it's brutal, winners writing history in genes. And the Y chromosome tales, paternal lines showing bottlenecks, wipes from conflicts or disasters. One lineage dominates North America, hinting at a star cluster effect, like one lucky guy's descendants exploding. Irony, was he a hero or just prolific? Pain, wars erase other lines, families shattered. Shifting to Central America, DNA from Mayan ruins shows continuity with those early migrants, but with local twists. Agriculture blooms around 10,000 years ago. Corn domestication, a sarcastic gift to the world. Hey, we turned grass into food, now everyone can get fat. But pain lurks, droughts kill crops, forcing migrations within migrations. Absurd cycles move for water, build cities, overpopulate, collapse, repeat. In the Andes, Inca ancestors' genes adapt to altitude, thicker blood, bigger lungs. Evolution's cruel joke, survive hypoxia or die trying. Migrants gasping for air, selections weeding out the weak. Pain embodied, generations of suffering for that genetic edge. Back north, the Mississippian cultures, mound builders, their DNA linking to Sioux and others. Irony, they create Cahokia, a city rivaling European ones, yet savages label stakes later. Pain, plagues from overdensity, wars for cornfields. As we wrap this first chunk, ancient migration's nightmare fuel. Remember, DNA's rewriting the script. No single heroic crossing. It's waves of absurdity, pain, survival. Teaser, next part? European discovery turns this into hell. But comment now. What's your take on these DNA twists? Shocking or expected? Hit like if you're hooked. Subscribe for part 2. Let's keep the conversation alive. Your thoughts fuel this sarcasm fest. Alright, buckle up, because the DNA saga of Native American migrations just gets wilder. If you thought the first part was a chaotic trek through ice and irony, wait till you see the next act, where ancient wanderers keep rewriting history with every bone we dig up. Picture this, you're chilling in a world without Wi-Fi, chasing mammoths, when your descendants' DNA spills tea that makes historians choke on their coffee. Multiple migrations? Check. Absurd survival stories, double check. So, grab your metaphorical popcorn, drop a comment. Seriously, tell me which ancient disaster you'd survive. And let's dive into part 2 of this genetic roller coaster, dripping with sarcasm and the pain of the past. We left off with our intrepid Siberian nomads and their coastal cousins scattering across the Americas, their DNA weaving a tapestry of survival that laughs at the idea of a single migration. But, oh, the plot thickens. Around 15,000 years ago, the first wave's descendants are spreading like wildfire, from Alaska's tundra to Patagonia's windswept cliffs. They're not just surviving, they're inventing. Tools, languages, cultures, all born in a crucible of adapt or die. But here's the irony. While they're carving out civilizations, the world's still a meat grinder. One bad winter, one failed hunt, and your whole clan's a footnote in the fossil record. Survival's a cruel lottery, and the house always wins. Let's zoom in on the absurdity. Take the Anzac child, a 12,600-year-old skeleton from Montana, whose DNA screamed Clovis culture, but also whispered secrets of deeper roots. Scientists in 2014 decoded his genome, expecting a neat link to Siberia. Surprise! He's tied to both the first wave and some mysterious lineage that doesn't quite fit. It's like finding out your great-grandpa was secretly a time traveler. The pain? This kid, buried with ceremonial tools, probably died young. His parents' grief etched in the artifacts they left behind. Imagine the scene. A mother, hands trembling, placing a flint spear point beside her son, knowing the clan must move on or starve. That's the raw ache of survival. No time for mourning when wolves are circling. Now, let's talk about the second wave, or waves, because DNA doesn't play nice. Around 10,000 years ago, the ice is retreating and new groups trickle in. The Na-Dene peoples, ancestors of the Navajo and Apache, show up fashionably late, their genes shouting Siberia, but make it different. Studies from 2019, like those in S3xual, show their DNA diverged earlier, maybe from a separate Beringian. Pit stop. Absurdity alert. These guys bring bows and arrows, tech that makes Clovis spears look like sticks. But the pain? They're crashing an already crowded party. Original inhabitants aren't rolling out the welcome mat. Think territorial fights, blood on the plains. One bad skirmish, and your family's erased, your genes snuffed out. Survival's a knife fight, and the scars are in the Y chromosome. Speaking of, let's get sarcastic about the Y. Paternal lineages are a genetic soap opera. DNA studies show a dominant male line sweeping North America. Like one guy's descendants hit the jackpot while others got wiped. Was he a warrior, a charmer, or just lucky? Irony, his legacy thrives, but the losers? Gone, their stories buried under dirt and time. Pain hits hard. Warfare, disease, or just bad luck, entire clans vanish, their men's genes culled by fate's cruel editing. Women's mitochondrial DNA tells a softer story, more mixing, less erasure, but it's still a grind. A woman surviving childbirth in 10,000 BC, heroic. Doing it while running from a bear, absurdly heroic. Now let's sail south, way south. South America's DNA is a plot twist wrapped in a riddle. Those Australasian signals from part 1, they're screaming louder now. A 2015 study in Science found traces in Amazonian tribes like the Surui, hinting at a migration so wild it defies logic. Picture this, Proto-Polynesian types, maybe 15,000 years ago, paddling across the Pacific in canoes that make your kayak look like a yacht. They hit Chile or Peru, mix with locals, then vanish into the jungle. Absurd? Hell yeah. Crossing an ocean with Stone Age tech is like playing Russian roulette with a tsunami. Pain? Half your crew drowns, the rest starve on beaches, yet their genes sneak into the gene pool, giggling at archaeologists who can't explain it. Comment below, would you board that canoe or nah? Let's humanize this mess. Meet Quay, a fictional teen from the second wave, hauling his family's gear across a desert that'll become Arizona. His dad's limping from a bison hunt gone wrong. Hoof to the shin, no doctor, just prayers. Quee's job, keep the fire lit, dodge rattlesnakes, and not cry when hunger gnaws his gut. Irony, he's inventing survival hacks, sinew thread, cactus water, while his descendants will one day get called primitive. Pain, his sister's cough isn't just a cold, it's a death sentence without herbs they can't find. Quay's story lives in Navajo DNA, but his daily grind, a brutal gamble where losing means extinction. Back to science, because it's rude like that. Ancient DNA from Peru, dated around 9,000 years ago, shows early South Americans were already diverse, splitting into subgroups faster than you can say population bottleneck. They're farming quinoa, building terraces, and fighting over the best alpaca pastures. Absurdity. They're laying the groundwork for empires like the Inca, yet one drought could end it all. Pains in the bones. Skeletons show malnutrition, broken skulls from raids. Survival's a tightrope. Innovate or die, but innovation takes energy you don't have when you're eating dirt. Then there's the Arctic plotline. The Paleo-Eskimos, ancestors of modern Inuit, are DNA outliers. Their genes, sequenced in 2020, show a migration around 5,000 years ago, distinct from earlier waves. These folks are hardcore. Think ice fishing in blizzards, sewing parkas from seal guts. Irony. Their tech is so advanced NASA could take notes, yet they're isolated, their gene pool shrinking like a puddle in the sun. Pain? Try raising kids in perpetual winter, where a bad hunt means no food for weeks. One elder skeleton showed arthritis so bad she couldn't move, yet her clan carried her, because leaving her meant losing her stories. That's love and its agony. Let's talk culture clashes. As these waves collide, first migrants, Nadine latecomers, Arctic specialists, tensions flare. DNA from mass graves in British Columbia, around 6,000 years old, hints at violence. Arrowheads in ribs, skulls cracked like eggs. Absurdity. They're fighting over land nobody owns, in a world where property is a joke. Pain. Your brother dies in a raid, your village burns, and you're forced to merge with the victors or flee. Genes mix, but at what cost? Survivors carry trauma in their blood, their stories fading until a lab in Germany sequences their truth. Agriculture's another kicker. By 8,000 years ago, Mesoamericans are domesticating corn, beans, squash, the three sisters that'll feed empires. Sarcasm alert. Thanks for the tacos, ancient farmers, but did you have to make it so hard? Pains in the labor, clearing jungles with stone tools, praying for rain that doesn't come. Irony. They're building food security while starving half the time. DNA from Copan ruins shows these farmers were cousins to the first wave, but their lives? A grind of planting, praying, and burying kids who didn't make it. And the Andes. Oh, the Andes. High altitude genes are evolving, letting people breathe where oxygen's a rumor. A 2016 study in Nature Genetics pinned this adaptation to 8,000 years ago, a middle finger to nature's cruelty. Absurdity. They're thriving at 14,000 feet while lowlanders wheeze. Pain. Every pregnancy's a risk. Miscarriages, stillbirths, mothers dying. Yet their genes spread, a testament to stubbornness. Let's not forget the Great Plains. Bison hunters, ancestors of the Lakota, leave DNA trails linking back to the first wave, but with Nadine sprinkles. They're mobile, following herds living in teepees that laugh at storms. Irony. Their freedom's unmatched, yet they're one bad hunt from famine. Pain. A stampede crushes your cousin. You mourn while skinning the beast that killed him. Survival's a sick joke. As we close this chapter, DNA's screaming, no single story, no clean lines. It's a mess of migrations, clashes, and grit. Teaser. For part 3, European contact turns this saga into a tragedy of cosmic proportions. But pause. Comment now. What's the most absurd survival tactic you've heard from this? Canoes across oceans or igloos in blizzards? Hit like, subscribe, and let's keep unraveling this genetic circus. Alright, you've stuck with us through the genetic jungle of Native American migrations, where DNA laughs at tidy history books and survival's a sarcastic middle finger to nature's cruelty. If you thought the first 2 parts were wild, Ice Age road trips, Pacific canoe stunts, and Arctic survival hacks, brace yourself. Part 3 is where the plot twists into a tragedy so absurd it'd make Shakespeare quit. European explorers crash the party and the pain skyrockets. Grab a snack, hit pause if you dare, and comment, what's the worst discovery blunder you can imagine? Let's dive into this mess of microbes, muskets, and misplaced maps with enough irony to sink a galleon. We're picking up around 10,000 years ago, where native peoples have already turned the Americas into a mosaic of cultures. Corn farmers in Mesoamerica, bison chasers on the plains, whale hunters in the Arctic. Their DNA is a testament to grit. Multiple migrations, genetic admixtures, adaptations to altitude and ice. They've built cities like Cahokia, bigger than medieval London, and irrigation systems that'd make Romans jealous. But here's the kicker. They're about to get discovered by a guy who thinks he's in India. Enter Christopher Columbus, stage left, 1492, with a navigation error so epic it rebrands a continent. Irony alert. Native Americans, thriving for millennia, are about to be labeled savages by folks who don't bathe. Pain? Oh, it's coming. Buckets of it. Columbus lands in the Caribbean, meets the Taino, and the DNA story takes a dark turn. These folks, descendants of those early coastal paddlers, have genes tracing back to the first Siberian wave, with a splash of that mysterious Australasian spice. They're fishing, farming, living the island life, until Spanish ships roll in. Absurdity. Columbus writes in his journal that the Taino are gentle and easily converted, then proceeds to enslave them. Pain hits like a tidal wave. By 1550, Taino populations plummet from millions to thousands. Smallpox, measles, flu. European germs are the real conquistadors. Native immune systems shaped by isolated millennia crumple. A 2019 study in Nature sequenced Taino remains, showing genetic continuity until disease erased them. Imagine the horror. Your village coughing blood, no medicine, no answers, just invaders demanding gold while you bury your kids. Let's zoom out. DNA tells us the first wave's descendants, spread from Alaska to Argentina, are hit hardest. Their genetic bottlenecks, forged by ancient migrations, make them sitting ducks for pandemics. Irony, they survived ice ages, megafauna, and starvation, but a sneeze from a sailor wipes entire tribes. Pain's in the numbers. By 1600, some estimates say 90% of native populations are gone. 90%. Survivors carry trauma in their genes, their stories whispered in mitochondrial DNA. A 2021 science study found modern native genomes still bear scars of this collapse. Low diversity, echoes of mass death. But let's not skip the absurdity of exploration. Hernán Cortés lands in Mexico 1519 and meets the Aztecs, whose capital, Tenochtitlan, is a floating marvel of 200,000 people. DNA links them to early migrants, with maize farming genes that scream adaptation. Cortés, with 500 men and a smallpox outbreak, topples it. Sarcasm drips. Congrats, Hernán, you conquered a city with germs and horses while Moctezuma's wondering why his god sent this bearded disaster. Pain's visceral. Aztec codices describe bodies piling up, canals choked with dead. Survivors flee, their DNA mixing with Spanish conquerors, birthing mestizo lines that still dominate Latin America. Up north, the story's no prettier. The Plains tribes, Lakota, Cheyenne, trace back to those bison-hunting nomads, their genes a blend of first wave and Nadine ancestry. Enter the French and English, 1600s, trading guns and smallpox blankets. Irony, natives adopt horses, becoming the ultimate cavalry, only to face settlers who think manifest destiny means stealing everything. Pain's in the battles. By the 1800s, tribes like the Comanche are fighting a losing war against rifles and railroads. DNA from Lakota remains, sequenced in 2023, shows continuity but also loss. Entire clans erased, their genes fading like forgotten songs. Let's humanize this. Picture Tala, a Taino woman in 1500, weaving nets on Hispaniola. Her DNA's a roadmap of ancient migrations, her life a balance of fishing and festivals. Then, Spanish boots hit the shore. Her husband's enslaved, her son dies of fever, his small body burning in her arms. Absurdity. She's forced to serve men who call her home New Spain, as if her ancestors didn't cross Beringia for it. Pain. She survives barely, her genes passing through a daughter who will face the same hell. Tala's story echoes in modern Caribbean DNA, but her world's gone, replaced by sugar plantations. Now, the Arctic, because even the Inuit aren't spared. Their DNA, distinct from that 5,000-year-old migration, screams adaptation, fat metabolizing genes for a whale-heavy diet. But by the 1700s, European whalers and traders bring disease to Greenland and Canada. Sarcasm alert. Thanks, guys, for discovering people who've been here forever and gifting them tuberculosis. Pains in the isolation. Inuit communities, small and tight-knit, lose half their numbers. A 2020 American Journal of Human Genetics study shows their gene pool shrinking, a bottleneck within a bottleneck. Survivors adapt, trading harpoons for guns. But the cost? Elders gone, stories fading, kids raised in a world where civilized means forgetting who you are. South America's no escape. The Inca, their DNA tied to those high-altitude adapters, faced Pizarro in 1532. Their empire is a masterpiece, roads, terraces, astronomy, but smallpox arrives before the Spanish swords. Irony, Atahualpa's ransom, a room of gold, buys nothing but his strangling. Pains in the collapse. By 1600, Inca populations dropped from millions to under a million. DNA from Andean mummies, studied in 2018, shows resilience but also trauma. Genetic markers of stress, malnutrition. Survivors blend with Spanish settlers, their genes carrying forward but diluted, their quipus, knotted records, burned as pagan. Let's talk resistance because it's not all doom. The Mapuche in Chile, their DNA a mix of first wave and local adaptations, fight Spain for centuries. Absurdity, they're using Spanish horses to outmaneuver Spanish armies. Pain, every victory costs lives, villages razed, warriors tortured. Their genes persist, a 2022 study confirms, but their land shrinks, squeezed by colonies. Comment: would you join the Mapuche's guerrilla fight or try diplomacy with invaders? Spill your thoughts. Back to science. DNA's brutal honesty. A 2019 Nature Communication study mapped native genomes across the Americas, showing waves of mixing post-contact. Spanish, Portuguese, English genes creep in, often through violence, rape, forced marriages. Irony: the New World becomes a genetic blender, but at what cost? Pains in the erasure. Native languages banned, cultures outlawed. By 1800, mission systems in California chained Chumash and O'Flone to labor, their DNA surviving, but their freedom gone. Skeletons from mission graves show broken bones, malnutrition, survival's price. The absurdity peaks with civilization efforts. By the 1700s, Jesuits and Puritans are saving native souls while stealing their land. Sarcasm: nothing says salvation like smallpox in boarding schools. Pains generational. Kids torn from parents, their braids cut, their languages beaten out. DNA studies from 2021 show modern native communities, like the Cherokee, carry European admixture but cling to ancestral lines. Their survival's a middle finger to erasure, but the scars, eternal. Let's not forget the genetic wildcard, African DNA. Enslaved people brought by Europeans, mixed with native populations, especially in the Caribbean and Southeast. A 2020 genetic study found African markers in Seminole DNA, a testament to alliances, runaways and natives fighting together. Irony: two oppressed groups team up only to be crushed by bigger guns. Pain: their descendants face double erasure, neither fully native nor African in colonial eyes. As we wrap part 3, DNA screams a truth. Native peoples didn't just survive, they defied oblivion. But the European wave wasn't a migration, it was an invasion, rewriting genes through blood and fire. Teaser for part 4. Modern native DNA fights back, reclaiming history. Comment: what's the most gut-punching moment from this era for you? Like, subscribe, and let's keep this sarcastic saga rolling. Here we go, the final act of our DNA-fueled saga, where Native American history claws its way into the present with a smirk that says, "You thought we were done?" If the last 3 parts, Ice Age treks, canoe gambles, and European germ warfare, weren't enough to make you rethink everything, this one's a sarcastic victory lap. We're diving into modern native DNA, where science meets resilience, and the ghosts of ancient migrations laugh at attempts to erase them. Grab your coffee, hit pause if you're overwhelmed, and comment: what's the most epic comeback story you've heard? Let's wrap this tale with enough irony to rust a conquistador's armor and pain that still echoes in the genes. We're fast-forwarding to today. Well, 2025, close enough. Native American communities, from the Navajo Nation to the Amazon's Yanomami, carry DNA that's a living archive of those Beringian wanderers, Pacific voyagers, and Arctic survivors. But here's the kicker. After centuries of disease, displacement, and civilizing nonsense, their genes are still here, flipping the bird to history's eraser. A 2023 Nature study mapped genomes across 50 native groups, showing not just survival but diversity, first-wave roots, Nadine sprinkles, Inuit uniqueness, even those wild Australasian echoes. Irony: while colonial powers tried to homogenize them into oblivion, native DNA screaming, "We're still us, deal with it." Pain? It's baked into the story. Every surviving gene carries scars of loss, from smallpox graves to boarding school trauma. Let's start with the science, because it's rude and glorious. Modern DNA sequencing, like the 2021 Genomics Project on Cherokee ancestry, shows how tightly these communities hold to their roots. Despite European admixture, thanks colonizers for the unasked for gene mixing, core lineages trace back 20,000 years to those Siberian nomads. Absurdity. Scientists once thought native populations were wiped out genetically. Nope. Cherokee, Lakota, Maya. Their mitochondrial DNA hums the same tune as their ancestors, like a song that refuses to fade. Pains in the gaps. Low genetic diversity from colonial bottlenecks means higher disease risks today. Diabetes, heart issues, modern health crises rooted in 16th century plagues. Survival's a cruel tax collector. Now picture this. A Navajo elder in Arizona, 2025, spitting into a tube for a DNA test. Her genome lights up with markers from the Na-Dene migration, that latecomer wave from 9,000 years ago. She's a walking history book, but the irony? Her ancestors' story was nearly erased by reservations and forced marches. The Trail of Tears, 1830s, thousands of Cherokee, Choctaw, others dragged from their homes. Pains in the numbers. A third didn't survive the trek. Yet, DNA from modern Cherokee, sequenced in 2022, shows resilience. Genes that dodged extinction, carrying stories of bison hunts and starlit councils. Sarcasm alert. Thanks, America, for relocating people who crossed Beringia before your country was a twinkle in anyone's eye. South America's no less defiant. The Quechua, descendants of Inca highlanders, carry those altitude-adapted genes from 8,000 years ago. A 2020 American Journal of Human Genetics study found their oxygen-efficient blood still thrives, letting them out-hike tourists at 15,000 feet. Absurdity. While colonial powers looted their gold, their DNA was quietly winning at evolution. Pains in the present. Mining companies encroach on their lands, threatening the very mountains their genes were built for. Yet, they fight. Lawsuits, protests, their DNA a silent witness to millennia of holding ground. Let's humanize it. Meet Yara, a fictional Lakota woman in 2025, running a community center in South Dakota. Her DNA is a cocktail of first-wave migrants and Na-Dene warriors, with a dash of European from some fur trader ancestor she'd rather forget. She's teaching kids Lakota language, reviving what boarding schools tried to kill. Irony. Her great-grandparents were punished for speaking it. Now it's on Duolingo. Pain. Her cousins battling addiction, a legacy of generational trauma from reservations where hope was rationed. Yara's genome, sequenced in a tribal study, links her to Clovis hunters, but her fight's modern, keeping culture alive in a world that still wants to assimilate her. Speaking of assimilation, let's talk boarding schools, colonial absurdity at its peak. From the 1800s to the 1970s, Native kids were ripped from families, their hair cut, their names changed. Sarcasm. Nothing says progress like beating culture out of children. Pain's generational. A 2021 genetic study found epigenetic markers, stress baked into DNA, among Navajo and Sioux descendants linked to those schools. Survivors passed on not just genes but trauma, a molecular echo of stolen childhoods. Yet tribes like the Ojibwe are reclaiming identity, using DNA to trace ancestry and rebuild enrollment. Irony. The same science that once justified racial inferiority now proves their ancient roots. The Arctic's still kicking too. Inuit communities in Canada, their DNA distinct from that 5,000-year-old Paleo-Eskimo wave, face climate change head-on. A 2022 Science Advances study shows their fat metabolism genes still help them thrive on seal and whale diets, but warming seas threaten their food. Absurdity. They survived ice ages, now they're dodging melting ice caps. Pain. Relocating villages as coasts erode, losing sacred sites to waves. Yet their DNA persists, a testament to ancestors who harpooned whales in blizzards. They're adapting again, solar panels, modern boats, but the ache of losing ancestral land stings. Let's not skip the Caribbean, where Taino DNA refuses to stay buried. A 2019 Nature study found their genes in modern Puerto Ricans, mixed with African and European, but still there, like a ghost waving from 1492. Irony, Columbus called them extinct, their DNA begs to differ. Pain, their culture's a shadow, ceremonial sites paved over, languages lost, but communities are reviving Taino identity, using DNA to reconnect with roots. Comment, would you dig into your own DNA for surprises like this? Spill it. Now, the legal fight, because DNA is not just science, it's power. Tribes like the Mashpi Wampanoag use genetic studies to prove continuous ancestry, fighting for federal recognition. Absurdity. They have to prove they exist to the same government that stole their land. Pain. Court battles drain resources while elders die waiting for justice. A 2023 genomic study helped the Mashpi trace lineage to pre-contact Wampanoag, but bureaucracy moves slower than a glacier. Their genes shout, "We're still here," while policymakers shrug. And the wild card, African native mixing. Seminole DNA, studied in 2020, shows African ancestry from runaway slaves who joined them in Florida's swamps. Irony, two groups screwed over by colonialism built families only to face double erasure. Pain, their descendants navigate identity in a world that boxes them as other, yet their genes tell a story of alliance, resistance, a middle finger to oppression. DNA is also rewriting history books. Ancient genomes from Alaska to Peru, sequenced in 2024, confirm those multiple migrations. Siberian, Nadine, Inuit, maybe even Pacific hoppers. Absurdity. Archaeologists spent decades arguing Clovis first, while the native oral histories said, "Told you were older." Pain. Those stories were dismissed as myths until DNA backed them up. Now, tribes like the Haida are collaborating with scientists, blending oral tradition with genomics to map their past. Sarcasm. Congrats, Western science, for catching up to what elders knew all along. Let's talk culture's comeback. Powwows, language apps, tribal museums. Native communities are stitching their DNA story into modernity. The Diné Navajo run genetic projects to trace health patterns, fighting diabetes with science and tradition. Irony. The same colonizers who brought disease now fund the labs helping fix it. Pain. Every step forward battles systemic neglect. Underfunded schools, crumbling clinics, yet their genes endure, a 20,000-year middle finger to erasure. As we close this saga, DNA is the ultimate storyteller. It screams of ancient voyages, colonial horrors, and modern defiance. Native Americans aren't just survivors. They're architects of a future where their genes, stories, and sarcasm outlast empires. Final call. Comment your favorite moment from this series. Was it the Beringian treks, the German invasions, or this comeback? Like, subscribe, and let's keep the conversation alive. Your thoughts are the spark that keeps this history burning. Imagine this. A sultan locked in a golden cage for years, emerging as a whirlwind of lust and lunacy, drowning hundreds of women in jealousy, obsessing over the fattest concubines, and bankrupting an empire for fur-lined fantasies. This isn't a twisted fairy tale. It's the real absurd nightmare of Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman ruler who turned the throne into a throne of thorns. Buckle up for a sarcastic dive into history's hottest mess. The Ottoman Empire in the 17th century, a glittering behemoth stretching from the sands of Arabia to the gates of Vienna, where sultans ruled like gods, but gods with a penchant for fratricide and fabulous excess. Survival? A brutal Game of Thrones where brothers slit throats for the crown, and the losers ended up in shallow graves or worse, forgotten in the palace's shadowy corners. Enter Ibrahim, born on a crisp October day in 1615, or was it 1616? History's a bit fuzzy, like the furs he'd later crave. Son of Sultan Ahmed Thrivers and the cunning Kosem Sultan, a Greek beauty plucked from obscurity and renamed for her silky skin. Little Ibrahim popped into a world where imperial babies were pawns in a deadly chess match. His dad, Ahmed, kicked the bucket when Ibrahim was just a toddler, sparking a merry-go-round of unstable uncles and brothers on the throne. First, Uncle Mustafa I, a man so unhinged he talked to the birds and thought he was a prophet. Ironic foreshadowing, huh? Then Big Brother Osman II, who got strangled by his own guards. But the real terror came with Murad IV, Ibrahim's full brother, a booze-soaked tyrant who banned alcohol empire-wide while guzzling it himself. Hypocrisy? Ottoman specialty. Murad, paranoid as a cat in a dog pound, locked up potential rivals in the cafes, that infamous cage, a luxurious prison within the Topkapi Palace where princes lived like pampered birds, clipped wings and all. Ibrahim, barely out of diapers, got tossed in there around age 2 or 3. Imagine, no sunlight, no freedom, just endless days staring at walls, hearing whispers of executions. His half-brothers, Bayezid, Suleiman, Qasim, marched to the chopping block one by one, their screams echoing through the marble halls. Survival pain? Ibrahim trembled daily, expecting the executioner's bowstring around his neck. Murad spared him, thinking the kid was too feeble-minded to threaten anyone. Oh, the irony. Locked away for 22 years, Ibrahim's mind warped like a sword in a forge. No education, no friends, just servants and the occasional visit from Mom Kosum, who schemed like a spider to keep her boy breathing. She fed him tales of the outside world, but mostly he stewed in isolation, his psyche cracking under the weight of fear. Historical absurdity. The empire's future ruler, reduced to a caged animal, while peasants outside scraped by on bread and taxes, dodging wars and plagues. Life expectancy? Maybe 40 if you were lucky, shorter if the Sultan's mood swung foul. Fast forward to 1640. Murad IV drops dead at 27, probably from cirrhosis. Poetic justice for a teetotaler tyrant. The palace buzzes. Who's next? Ibrahim, the last male Ottoman left, but he's convinced it's a trap. When messengers bang on his cage door, yelling, "You're Sultan now!" he barricades himself, screaming it's a ploy to lure him out for slaughter. Kosum, ever the puppet master, drags Murad's corpse to the door for proof. Ibrahim peeks, pokes the body. Yep, dead as a doornail. He emerges, blinking like a mole in sunlight, and ascends as Sultan Ibrahim I, age 23, but mentally a shattered vase glued with lust and lunacy. Early days? Surprisingly stable thanks to Grand Vizier Kemankesh, Kara Mustafa Pasha, a competent chap who kept the empire humming. Peace treaties with Austria, reclaiming Azov from Cossacks, boring but effective. But Ibrahim, politics bored him. He retreated to the harem, that steamy labyrinth of silk and secrets, where survival for women meant pleasing the Sultan or facing oblivion. Oh, the harem, Ottoman's ultimate power play, where hundreds of concubines vied for favor, birthing heirs or vanishing into obscurity. Ibrahim dove in head first, his obsessions blooming like weeds in a neglected garden. Historians like Demetrius Cantemir quipped, as Murad was addicted to wine, so was Ibrahim to lust. He'd exhaust himself with venereal delights, then down potions to rally, demanding fresh virgins from mom or ministers. Absurd? He lined his chambers with mirrors to watch his love battles from every angle, stuffing pillows with sable furs because, why not? Survival pain for those women, plucked from villages or slave markets. They endured the Sultan's whims, pregnancies without rights, and the constant threat of discard. One wrong word, and poof, exiled to the old palace, begging for scraps. Ibrahim's early favorites. He elevated 8 concubines to Haseki status, a record, showering them with jewels and lands. But his tastes, twisted an obsession with obese women. Scouts scoured the empire for the fattest, like Shivakar Sultan, a 330-pound Armenian beauty he dubbed Sugar Lump. Ironic, in a famine-prone era where peasants starved, the Sultan fetishized fat as luxury. But let's crank the sarcasm. Ibrahim, fresh from his cage, now caged the world in his madness. He demanded furs, lynx, sable, you name it, earning the French nickname Le Fou de Fourrure. One room, entirely fur-lined, floor to ceiling. He'd roll in it, purring like a cat on catnip. Absurd historical nugget. After a concubine spun a yarn about a sable paradise, he dressed palace cats in tiny sable coats and gold collars, letting them roam. Survival? Those poor felines probably clawed their way out, while courtiers groveled, hiding terror behind smiles. The empire groaned under taxes to fund this fluff. Peasants sold kids into slavery to pay up, dodging janissary raids. Pain of the past. Plague ravaged Istanbul, bodies piled in streets, but Ibrahim partied on, his headaches pounding like war drums. Diving deeper, Ibrahim's lust wasn't confined to the harem. Brief, intense obsessions with outsiders, women glimpsed in markets or baths. Agents kidnapped them, ignoring husbands or status. Take the Grand Mufti's daughter. Ibrahim proposed, she refused. He raped her anyway, then sent her home like damaged goods. The Mufti? Seethed, plotting revenge. Ironic. the empire's top religious scholar, humiliated by the defender of the faith. Another tale, Ibrahim spied a cow with a perfect udder, molded it in gold, and sent replicas empire-wide to find matching women. Success? A hefty virgin joined the harem. Absurdity peaks, ruling a superpower but fixated on bovine beauty standards. Politically, chaos brewed. Kara Mustafa Pasha got axed in 1644, victim of court intrigue. Enter Chinsi Hoka, a charlatan healer who cured Ibrahim's impotence with quack potions and rose to Grand Vizier. Sarcasm alert, nothing says stable governance like promoting a snake oil salesman. Under him, corruption exploded, bribes, embezzlement, while Crete's invasion in 1645 sparked an endless war with Venice. Why? Knights of Malta seized a pilgrim ship. Ibrahim, egged on, declared jihad. Result? Venetian blockade starved Istanbul, riots brewed, survival horror, fishermen drowned in crossfire, merchants bankrupted, all for a sultan's whim. But oh, the personal horrors. Ibrahim's son Mehmed, future Mehmed IV, barely survived daddy's rage. Jealous of attention on the baby, Ibrahim hurled him into a cistern, scarring his forehead forever. Pain? That kid grew up knowing dad's love could kill. And the harem drownings. Rumors swirled of infidelity. Ibrahim, paranoid, ordered 280 concubines sacked and tossed into the Bosphorus. Only one survived, washing ashore. Exaggerated? Maybe, but the body count's real. His madness claimed lives like flies. Engaging you viewers, what would you do locked in a cage for decades? Go mad or plot revenge? Drop a comment. Let's debate history's wildest what-ifs. As Ibrahim's obsession spiraled, the empire teetered. Qasim pulled strings, supplying virgins to distract him, but cracks widened. He played horse with naked concubines, demanding they kick and neigh. Absurd theater in marble halls. One rebelled with a dagger. He laughed it off. Ironic. Women, powerless pawns, surviving by wit or submission in a world where sultans played God. Winding Part 1. Ibrahim's ascent from cage to crown birthed a monster of lust, his early rule a facade cracking under absurdity. The pain? An empire bled dry, subjects starving while he frolicked. Historical nightmare. Power corrupts, but isolation destroys. Stay tuned for Part 2, where obsessions hit fever pitch and downfall looms. Comment your craziest sultan theory. Welcome back to our wild ride through the lust-soaked lunacy of Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman Sultan who turned the Topkapi Palace into a circus of desire and derangement. If you thought Part 1 was a fever dream, brace for Part 2, where Ibrahim's obsessions crank up to absurd new heights, dragging the empire deeper into chaos while his harem becomes a gilded nightmare. We're diving back into the 17th century Ottoman world, where survival was a knife-edge dance and the Sultan's whims could drown you, literally. Let's unpack this historical horror show with a smirk and a shiver. We left Ibrahim in 1640, freshly crowned and already drowning in his harem silks and furs. The Ottoman Empire, sprawling from Budapest to Baghdad, was a juggernaut teetering on the edge. Wars with Venice, rebellions in Anatolia, and a treasury bleeding faster than a Janissary in battle. Ibrahim, now in his mid-20s, should have been steering the ship, but instead he was steering straight into debauchery. His 22 years in the cafes, that claustrophobic palace prison, had warped him into a man-child with a sultan's power and a libertine's appetite. The irony? The empire needed a warrior. It got a playboy who thought diplomacy meant bedding every woman in sight. Survival pain. Peasants starved as taxes funded his fur-lined fantasies, while plague-ridden Istanbul choked on its own dead. Let's dive into the harem, the beating heart of Ibrahim's madness. This wasn't just a pleasure den. It was a political arena where concubines clawed for influence, their lives hanging on the Sultan's fleeting favor. Ibrahim's obsession with obese women hit fever pitch. After crowning Shivakar Sultan, his 330-pound sugar lump, he demanded more. Agents scoured the empire from the Caucasus to Crimea for women who tipped the scales. One, a Georgian named Dilsha, weighed in at nearly 400 pounds and became his new fixation, draped in jewels that could have fed a village. Absurdity? He built her a special throne to withstand her weight, while famine gripped Anatolia. Sarcastic nudge. Nothing says divine ruler like bankrupting your empire for a bigger bed. The pain? These women, often enslaved, faced relentless pressure to perform. their bodies paraded like trophies. Refusal meant exile, or worse, a sack in the Bosphorus. Speaking of sacks, let's revisit the infamous harem drownings. In 1647, paranoia gripped Ibrahim. A rumor, likely planted by jealous courtiers, whispered of a concubine's infidelity. His response? Order 280 women tied in weighted sacks and tossed into the Bosphorus, their screams muffled by the waves. One survived, fished out by a French merchant, her tale recorded by chronicler Naima. Exaggerated? Possibly, but the body count was real. Ironic. The protector of the faithful massacred his own harem, claiming to protect his honor. Survival horror. Those women, torn from families, had no voice, their lives snuffed out on a whim. The empire's women learned a grim lesson: serve or sink. But Ibrahim's lust wasn't just physical, it was theatrical. He staged love battles in fur-lined chambers, mirrors reflecting every angle. He'd play sultan and slave, forcing concubines to act out roles from Persian myths, complete with costumes and fake battles. One night, he demanded a reenactment of a harem rebellion, arming women with blunt daggers, until one got too real, grazing his arm. He laughed, made her a haseki, and doubled her allowance. Absurdity at its peak, a sultan turning near assassination into foreplay. Pain. Those women, playing along to survive, faced constant fear. Anger him, and you're dead. Bore him, and you're discarded. Let's pivot to Ibrahim's fur fetish, earning him that French moniker, Le Fou de Fourrure. His rooms weren't just lined with sable, they were shrines to it. He'd bury himself in pelts, demanding concubines wrap themselves in furs before joining him. One tale, Per Evliya Çelebi, has him commissioning a fur-lined boat for harem escapades on the Bosphorus, rocking more than just the waves. Sarcastic gem. Governing an empire? Nah, let's sail in style, wrapped in dead animals. The horror? Fur traders jacked prices, fleecing merchants, while peasants froze in threadbare rags. Survival meant dodging tax collectors who'd seize your last goat to fund Ibrahim's fuzzy obsession. Politically, things were unraveling. The Venetian War over Crete, sparked in 1645, was a disaster. Ibrahim, egged on by Chinsi Hoka, his quack-turned vizier, ignored the navy's pleas for funds. Instead, he taxed the empire to death, funding harem feasts and fur imports. Istanbul rioted, fishmongers and bakers stormed the streets, their livelihoods crushed by blockades. Ironic, the Sultan, meant to protect his people, starved them for his pleasures. Pain. Families sold children into slavery to eat, while janissaries, unpaid, plotted mutiny. Ibrahim's personal life? A soap opera of jealousy. His mother, Kosem, still pulled strings, but her influence waned as Ibrahim's harem favorites gained power. Shivakar and Humasha, another haseki, clashed like cats, each vying for top spot. Shivakar once accidentally spilled scalding tea on a rival's gown, earning a week in Ibrahim's bed as reward. Absurd. A harem where tea was a weapon and favor a death sentence. Survival pain. Concubines lived in terror, knowing a rival's whisper could land them in a sack or exiled to the old palace, a dumping ground for discarded women. Let's talk specific scandals. In 1646, Ibrahim fixated on a Greek singer spotted at a palace feast. He kidnapped her, ignoring her betrothed, a janissary commander. The fallout? The commander defected to Venice, leaking Ottoman battle plans. Sarcastic twist. Love conquers all, including military strategy. Horror. The singer, pregnant, was banished when Ibrahim tired of her, dying in childbirth far from home. Another case. Ibrahim, drunk on power and wine, crashed a mosque during Ramadan, demanding the imam's wife join his harem. The imam refused. Ibrahim had him flogged. Ironic, defiling the holy month he swore to uphold. The animal antics add a bizarre layer. Ibrahim's love for cats turned pathological. He knighted his favorite feline, naming it Lion of the Palace, and fed it better than his guards. One day, he caught a concubine shooing it. Her punishment? Stripped and forced to crawl, meowing through the harem. Absurdity, ruling by cat logic in a human empire. Pain, that concubine, humiliated, later vanished, likely drowned or worse. Engaging you folks, what's the wildest thing you'd do with absolute power? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if you'd out crazy Ibrahim. Diving into the economy, Ibrahim's lust bankrupted the state. His harem ballooned to 500 women, each needing gowns, jewels, and food. He imported ambergris for perfumes, costing more than a warship. Chronicler Petavi notes the treasury dwindled as Ibrahim gifted estates to favorites like Humasha, who built a palace rivaling Topkapi. Sarcastic nudge: why fund an army when you can fund a fling? Survival horror: tax collectors, dubbed bloodsuckers, razed villages, leaving peasants to die in ditches while Ibrahim sniffed his scented oils. The harem's political clout grew toxic. Shivakar and others meddled in appointments, pushing loyalists into power. Chinchi Hocha, the fake healer, became Ibrahim's right hand, selling offices for gold. The result? A court of sycophants, blind to the empire's cracks. Ironic, the harem meant to be a sultan's pleasure became his puppet master. Pain: honest viziers, sidelined, face execution or exile, their families ruined. Ibrahim's health crumbled under his excesses. Potions for virility, mercury, opium, who knows what, wrecked his body. Headaches turned to rages. He'd lash out, once throwing a golden goblet at a page, blinding him. Absurd, a sultan too weak to rule, too strong to be stopped. Horror: that page, maimed for life, begged on Istanbul's streets, a living warning of Ibrahim's wrath. The Janissaries, the empire's elite troops, were simmering. Unpaid, they watched Ibrahim squander their wages on furs. In 1647, a riot erupted. Shops burned, and cries of "down with the mad sultan" echoed. Kosim, sensing the end, began plotting with the rebels. Ironic, the mother who saved him now schemed his doom. Pain: Istanbul's poor, caught in the riots, lost homes and lives to a sultan's folly. Winding down Part 2. Ibrahim's reign was a masterclass in self-destruction, his lust a flame that burned the empire's edges. The absurdity of a sultan ruled by his harem, the irony of a defender of faith defiling it, the pain of subjects crushed by his caprices, these defined his rule. Stay tuned for Part 3, where the noose tightens and madness meets its match. Comment below, would you rather face Ibrahim's harem or his janissaries? Let's hear it. Welcome back to our wild ride through the lust-soaked lunacy of Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman Sultan who turned the Topkapi Palace into a circus of desire and derangement. If you thought Part 1 was a fever dream, brace for Part 2, where Ibrahim's obsessions crank up to absurd new heights, dragging the empire deeper into chaos while his harem becomes a gilded nightmare. We're diving back into the 17th century Ottoman world, where survival was a knife-edge dance and the Sultan's whims could drown you, literally. Let's unpack this historical horror show with a smirk and a shiver. We left Ibrahim in 1640, freshly crowned and already drowning in his harem's silks and furs. The Ottoman Empire, sprawling from Budapest to Baghdad, was a juggernaut teetering on the edge. Wars with Venice, rebellions in Anatolia, and a treasury bleeding faster than a janissary in battle. Ibrahim, now in his mid-20s, should have been steering the ship, but instead he was steering straight into debauchery. His 22 years in the cafes, that claustrophobic palace prison, had warped him into a man-child with a sultan's power and a libertine's appetite. The irony? The empire needed a warrior. It got a playboy who thought diplomacy meant bedding every woman in sight. Survival pain. Peasants starved as taxes funded his fur-lined fantasies, while plague-ridden Istanbul choked on its own dead. Let's dive into the harem, the beating heart of Ibrahim's madness. This wasn't just a pleasure den, it was a political arena where concubines clawed for influence, their lives hanging on the Sultan's fleeting favor. Ibrahim's obsession with obese women hit fever pitch. After crowning Shivakar Sultan, his 330-pound sugar lump, he demanded more. Agents scoured the empire, from the Caucasus to Crimea, for women who tipped the scales. One, a Georgian named Dilsha, weighed in at nearly 400 pounds and became his new fixation, draped in jewels that could have fed a village. Absurdity? He built her a special throne to withstand her weight, while famine gripped Anatolia. Sarcastic nudge. Nothing says divine ruler like bankrupting your empire for a bigger bed. The pain? These women, often enslaved, faced relentless pressure to perform, their bodies paraded like trophies. Refusal meant exile, or worse, a sack in the Bosphorus. Speaking of sacks, let's revisit the infamous harem drownings. In 1647, paranoia gripped Ibrahim. A rumor, likely planted by jealous courtiers, whispered of a concubine's infidelity. His response? Order 280 women tied in weighted sacks and tossed into the Bosphorus, their screams muffled by the waves. One survived, fished out by a French merchant, her tale recorded by chronicler Naima. Exaggerated? Possibly, but the body count was real. Ironic, the protector of the faithful massacred his own harem, claiming to protect his honor. Survival horror. Those women torn from families had no voice, their lives snuffed out on a whim. The empire's women learned a grim lesson: serve or sink. But Ibrahim's lust wasn't just physical, it was theatrical. He staged love battles in fur-lined chambers, mirrors reflecting every angle. He'd play sultan and slave, forcing concubines to act out roles from Persian myths, complete with costumes and fake battles. One night, he demanded a reenactment of a harem rebellion, arming women with blunt daggers, until one got too real, grazing his arm. He laughed, made her a haseki, and doubled her allowance. Absurdity at its peak, a sultan turning near assassination into foreplay. Pain. Those women, playing along to survive, faced constant fear. Anger him, and you're dead. Bore him, and you're discarded. Let's pivot to Ibrahim's fur fetish, earning him that French moniker, Le Fou de Fourrure. His rooms weren't just lined with sable, they were shrines to it. He'd bury himself in pelts, demanding concubines wrap themselves in furs before joining him. One tale, per Evliya Çelebi, has him commissioning a fur-lined boat for harem escapades on the Bosphorus, rocking more than just the waves. Sarcastic gem. Governing an empire? Nah, let's sail in style, wrapped in dead animals. The horror? Fur traders jacked prices, fleecing merchants, while peasants froze in threadbare rags. Survival meant dodging tax collectors who'd seize your last goat to fund Ibrahim's fuzzy obsession. Politically, things were unraveling. The Venetian War over Crete, sparked in 1645, was a disaster. Ibrahim, egged on by Kinci Hoka, his quack-turned vizier, ignored the navy's pleas for funds. Instead, he taxed the empire to death, funding harem feasts and fur imports. Istanbul rioted, fishmongers and bakers stormed the streets, their livelihoods crushed by blockades. Ironic, the Sultan, meant to protect his people, starved them for his pleasures. Pain. Families sold children into slavery to eat, while janissaries, unpaid, plotted mutiny. Ibrahim's personal life? A soap opera of jealousy. His mother, Kosem, still pulled strings, but her influence waned as Ibrahim's harem favorites gained power. Shivakar and Humasha, another Haseki, clashed like cats, each vying for top spot. Shivakar, once accidentally, spilled scalding tea on a rival's gown, earning a week in Ibrahim's bed as reward. Absurd. A harem where tea was a weapon and favor a death sentence. Survival pain. Concubines lived in terror, knowing a rival's whisper could land them in a sack or exiled to the old palace, a dumping ground for discarded women. Let's talk specific scandals. In 1646, Ibrahim fixated on a Greek singer, spotted at a palace feast. He kidnapped her, ignoring her betrothed, a janissary commander. The fallout? The commander defected to Venice, leaking Ottoman battle plans. Sarcastic twist, love conquers all, including military strategy. Horror. The singer, pregnant, was banished when Ibrahim tired of her, dying in childbirth far from home. Another case, Ibrahim, drunk on power and wine, crashed a mosque during Ramadan, demanding the imam's wife join his harem. The imam refused. Ibrahim had him flogged. Ironic, defiling the holy month he swore to uphold. The animal antics add a bizarre layer. Ibrahim's love for cats turned pathological. He knighted his favorite feline, naming it Lion of the Palace, and fed it better than his guards. One day, he caught a concubine shooing it. Her punishment? Stripped and forced to crawl, meowing through the harem. Absurdity, ruling by cat logic in a human empire. Pain, that concubine, humiliated, later vanished, likely drowned or worse. Engaging you folks. What's the wildest thing you do with absolute power? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if you'd out-crazy Ibrahim. Diving into the economy, Ibrahim's lust bankrupted the state. His harem ballooned to 500 women, each needing gowns, jewels, and food. He imported ambergris for perfumes, costing more than a warship. Chronicler Petsevi notes the treasury dwindled as Ibrahim gifted estates to favorites like Humasha, who built a palace rivaling Topkapi. Sarcastic nudge. Why fund an army when you can fund a fling? Survival horror. Tax collectors, dubbed bloodsuckers, razed villages, leaving peasants to die in ditches while Ibrahim sniffed his scented oils. The harem's political clout grew toxic. Shivakar and others meddled in appointments, pushing loyalists into power. Chinchi Hoka, the fake healer, became Ibrahim's right hand, selling offices for gold. The result? A court of sycophants, blind to the empire's cracks. Ironic, the harem meant to be a sultan's pleasure became his puppet master. Pain. Honest viziers, sidelined, face execution or exile, their families ruined. Ibrahim's health crumbled under his excesses. Potions for virility, mercury, opium, who knows what, wrecked his body. Headaches turned to rages. He'd lash out, once throwing a golden goblet at a page, blinding him. Absurd, a sultan too weak to rule, too strong to be stopped. Horror, that page, maimed for life, begged on Istanbul's streets, a living warning of Ibrahim's wrath. The Janissaries, the empire's elite troops, were simmering. Unpaid, they watched Ibrahim squander their wages on furs. In 1647, a riot erupted. Shops burned, and cries of "Down with the mad sultan" echoed. Kosim, sensing the end, began plotting with the rebels. Ironic, the mother who saved him now schemed his doom. Pain, Istanbul's poor, caught in the riots, lost homes and lives to a sultan's folly. Winding down Part 2. Ibrahim's reign was a masterclass in self-destruction, his lust a flame that burned the empire's edges, the absurdity of a sultan ruled by his harem, the irony of a defender of faith defiling it, the pain of subjects crushed by his caprices. These defined his rule. Stay tuned for Part 3, where the noose tightens and madness meets its match. Comment below. Would you rather face Ibrahim's harem or his janissaries? Let's hear it. Here we go, plunging back into the feverish madness of Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman Sultan whose lustful obsessions turned the Topkapi Palace into a gilded asylum and the empire into a ticking time bomb. Part 3 of our sardonic saga dives deeper into the 1640s, where Ibrahim's depravity hits new lows, his court becomes a circus of sycophants, and the empire teeters on collapse. Expect more historical absurdity, biting irony, and the raw pain of survival in a world where a sultan's whim could mean a noose or a crown. Let's wade into this Ottoman nightmare with a grin and a grimace. It's 1647, and Ibrahim the Firmers, now pushing 30, is a walking paradox, a sultan with absolute power yet enslaved by his own desires. The Ottoman Empire, once a titan, is crumbling under his reign. Venetian blockades choke Crete, rebels stir in the provinces, and the treasury's drier than a desert well. Ibrahim, scarred from decades in the cafes, that claustrophobic palace cage, rules like a child let loose in a brothel. His mind, warped by isolation and fear, finds solace in excess, women, furs, and bizarre whims that make Caligula look restrained. The irony? He's the shadow of God on earth, but his shadow casts chaos, survival pain. Istanbul's streets are a graveyard of plague victims, while peasants sell their kids to pay taxes for Ibrahim's fur-lined fantasies. Let's zoom into the harem, where Ibrahim's lust has morphed into a grotesque spectacle. His obsession with obese women escalates. Shivakar, Sultan, and Dilsha, his hefty favorites, aren't enough. He dispatches agents to the Black Sea, ordering women who fill a room. One arrival, a Circassian dubbed Mountain of Delight, reportedly broke a palace bed frame. Ibrahim built her a marble bath, costing more than a Janissary regiment. Sarcastic gem. Why govern when you can renovate for romance? The horror. These women, often kidnapped, faced relentless demands: satisfy the Sultan or face exile to the old palace, a dumping ground where forgotten concubines begged for scraps. Survival meant enduring his rages, which could turn deadly. One concubine, refusing to neigh in his horse play games, was lashed and left in a dungeon. Absurdity. A sultan playing stable boy while his empire starved. The harem wasn't just a pleasure den, it was a political viper's nest. Shivakar and Humasha, Ibrahim's top Hasekis, wielded power like warlords. Shivakar, cunning as a fox, bribed viziers to oust rivals, while Humasha pushed her son Prince Mehmed as heir, sparking feuds. In 1647, Ibrahim, paranoid about plots, ordered his harem search for weapons. They found nothing but a hairpin in Humasha's room. He banished her anyway, claiming it was a dagger. Ironic, a hairpin as a threat to an empire. Pain, Humasha, stripped of status, was exiled with her toddler, Mehmed, who'd later bear the scars of his father's wrath. Concubines lived in terror, knowing a rival's whisper could end them. Let's talk Ibrahim's public displays. He'd parade through Istanbul, draped in sable, tossing gold coins to crowds, then tax them double to recoup it. One day, he crashed a bazaar, fixating on a jeweler's daughter. His guards abducted her. Her father protested and was beheaded. The girl? Added to the harem, then discarded when Ibrahim's interest waned. Sarcastic nudge. Nothing says people Sultan like kidnapping and execution. Horror. Her family, ruined, faced starvation. A common fate in a city where bread riots were daily news. Ibrahim's fur fetish reached lunatic heights. Avliya Chelebi recounts him commissioning a fur-lined throne, encrusted with emeralds, where he'd hold court naked, wrapped only in pelts. He demanded his viziers do the same, turning council meetings into furry fiascos. Absurdity, ruling an empire like a deranged trapper. Pain, the fur trade bled the treasury. Merchants hiked prices, and tax collectors raised villages to meet quotas. Peasants, already dodging plague and famine, burned their fields to avoid seizure, choosing hunger over servitude. Politically, the empire was a dumpster fire. The Venetian War, now in its third year, drained resources. Ibrahim, swayed by Tinsi the quack vizier, ignored the navy's pleas for ships. Instead, he funded a harem festival, complete with fire-eaters and dancers, costing a year's worth of grain. Chronicler Naima notes the janissaries, unpaid, looted markets, while Venetian cannons pounded Ottoman forts. Ironic, a sultan fighting for Crete while losing Istanbul's streets. Survival horror. Fishermen caught in blockades, drowned or starved, their families joining the city's growing beggar hordes. Ibrahim's health was collapsing. His virility potions, mercury-laced brews, triggered seizures and rages. He'd scream at shadows, claiming his dead brothers haunted him. One night, he ordered a palace wing burned, convinced it hid assassins. The fire spread, killing servants. Sarcastic twist, a sultan torching his own palace to feel safe. Pain. Those servants, loyal to a fault, died for a madman's paranoia. Their families left penniless. The court was a cesspool of corruption. Chinchi sold governorships to the highest bidder, pocketing gold while provinces fell to bandits. Ibrahim, oblivious, gifted estates to harem favorites. Shivakar's new palace in Üsküdar rivaled Topkapi, built while soldiers went unpaid. Ironic, a concubine outshining the Sultan's court. Horror. Governors, desperate for funds, extorted villagers, sparking revolts that left Anatolia in flames. Let's hit a specific scandal. In 1647, Ibrahim fixated on a Bosnian slave girl, bought for her moon-like face. He showered her with diamonds, naming her Aishi Sultan. Her brother, a palace guard, demanded her release. Ibrahim had him strangled. Aishi, pregnant, was sent to the old palace when Ibrahim tired of her, dying in childbirth. Absurd, love as a death sentence. Pain. Her brother's family, branded traitors, fled to the hills, hunted by janissaries. Another tale. Ibrahim, obsessed with astrology, hired a Greek seer who predicted his potency. The seer doubled as a pimp, supplying virgins for cosmic rituals. When one ritual failed, Ibrahim passed out drunk. The seer was beheaded. Sarcastic gem, trusting stars over strategy. Horror. Those virgins, often kidnapped, faced assault and abandonment, their lives shattered for a sultan's whim. Engaging you viewers. What's the craziest thing you'd buy with a sultan's wealth? Furs, jewels, or something wilder? Drop it in the comments. Let's match Ibrahim's madness. Ibrahim's cat obsession turned darker. His lion of the palace got a golden litter box, but when a concubine accidentally stepped on its tail, Ibrahim ordered her eyes gouged out. She survived, blinded, begging in the harem corridors. Absurdity, a cat with more rights than a human. Pain, that concubine, once a favorite, became a living ghost, shunned by all. The janissaries' discontent boiled over. In 1648, they stormed the palace gates, demanding Tinsi head. Ibrahim, in a rare lucid moment, handed him over. Hoka was torn apart by the mob. But it wasn't enough. The Janissaries, backed by the Grand Mufti, whispered of deposing the Sultan. Kosum, Ibrahim's mother, joined the plot, her love for her son outweighed by fear for the empire. Ironic, the woman who crowned him now sharpened the knife. Horror, Istanbul's poor, caught in the riots, faced swords and flames, their homes collateral damage. Ibrahim's harem games grew macabre. He'd stage hunts, chasing concubines through the palace gardens, armed with a jeweled crossbow. One bolt grazed a girl's leg. She was exiled for spoiling the fun. Absurd, a sultan playing predator with human prey. Pain, those women running for their lives knew survival meant pleasing a madman. The empire's religious elite turned on him. The Grand Mufti, humiliated by Ibrahim's mosque antics, issued a fatwa calling his rule unholy. Ibrahim responded by banning prayer in certain mosques, claiming they were cursed. Sarcastic twist, a Muslim sultan banning worship. Horror, imams, defying the ban, were flogged, their followers scattered into hiding. Winding down, Part 3, Ibrahim's reign was a spiral of lust and lunacy, his obsessions torching the empire's foundations. The absurdity of a fur-obsessed sultan, the irony of a holy ruler defiling faith, the pain of subjects crushed by his caprices. These were his legacy. Stay tuned for the final part, where the empire strikes back and Ibrahim's madness meets its end. Comment below. Would you rather face Ibrahim's crossbow or his court? Let's debate. Here we are at the final act of our twisted tale of Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman Sultan whose lustful obsessions turned an empire into a tragic circus. Part 4 plunges into the twilight of his reign in 1648, where madness, betrayal, and a noose tighten around the throne. Expect a crescendo of historical absurdity, biting sarcasm, and the brutal pain of survival in a world where a sultan's whims could drown cities in blood. Let's close this Ottoman nightmare with a smirk and a shudder. It's 1648, and Ibrahim Fervor, barely 32, is a husk of a ruler. His body ravaged by potions, his mind a labyrinth of paranoia and desire. The Ottoman Empire is a ship sinking under Venetian cannons, rebel uprisings, and a treasury looted by Ibrahim's fur-lined fantasies. Istanbul's streets reek of plague and revolt, with janissaries sharpening swords and peasants starving under taxes heavier than a harem bedframe. Ibrahim, once a trembling boy in the cafes, now rules as a tyrant unhinged, his lust a wildfire consuming all. The irony? He's the commander of the faithful, yet his faith lies in furs, women, and chaos. Survival pain. Families sell their last scraps to feed tax collectors, while the Bosphorus washes up bodies of those who dared whisper against the Sultan. The harem, that gilded cage, is now a battlefield. Shivakar's Sultan, the 330-pound sugar lump, and other Hasekis like Dilshah and Humasha wield power like daggers, bribing viziers to secure their sons' futures. Ibrahim, paranoid as ever, sees plots in every shadow. In spring 1648, he orders another harem purge, convinced of a coup. Dozens of concubines, some pregnant, are beaten and exiled to the old palace, a crumbling purgatory where they beg for bread. One, a Ukrainian named Zafira, dared slap a guard during the purge. Ibrahim had her tongue cut out. Sarcastic gem, nothing says divine justice like silencing a slave for defiance. Horror, Zafira, once a favorite, died of infection, her story buried with her. The harem's women, enslaved or coerced, lived in terror. One misstep meant death or worse. Ibrahim's fur obsession hits its absurd peak. He commissions a sable-lined tent for mobile pleasure, carting it to palace gardens for open-air orgies. Chronicler Evliya Çelebi claims Ibrahim ordered 10,000 pelts from Russia, bankrupting merchants and sparking riots when taxes tripled. He'd wrap himself and his favorites in furs, rolling in the grass like a deranged bear. Absurdity, a sultan playing beast while his empire burned. Pain, villages were razed to fund this furry madness, peasants fleeing to bandit-plagued hills, choosing outlawry over starvation. Let's dive into a specific scandal. Ibrahim's fixation on a Venetian captive, Maria, taken during the Crete War. Her beauty, described as a pearl of the Adriatic, caught his eye in 1648. He showered her with emeralds, naming her Star of the Sea. Her husband, a captured merchant, pleaded for her release. Ibrahim had him impaled outside the palace. Maria, forced into the harem, stabbed herself rather than submit. She survived, scarred, and was sent to a Crimean slave market. Ironic, a sultan seeking love, delivering death. Horror, Maria's family, hearing of her fate, perished in Venice's plague-ridden slums, their wealth seized by Ottoman agents. Another tale, Ibrahim, obsessed with prophecy, summoned a Persian mystic who promised eternal vigor through rituals involving virgins and goat blood. The mystic's ceremony was a thinly veiled orgy, with Ibrahim playing high priest. When the ritual failed, he collapsed mid-act. The mystic was drowned in the Bosphorus. Sarcastic twist, seeking immortality, finding idiocy. Pain, those virgins kidnapped from Anatolia faced assault and exile, their villages taxed to ruin for their sacrifice. The Janissaries, the empire's backbone, are done, unpaid for years. They watch Ibrahim squander gold on harem feasts while they dodge Venetian bullets in Crete. In August 1648, they storm Istanbul's mosques, rallying imams and merchants. The Grand Mufti, still smarting from Ibrahim's mosque desecrations, issues a fatwa. The Sultan is unfit, his rule a sin. Qasim Sultan, Ibrahim's mother, joins the plot, her heart torn but her ambition razor sharp. She backs the Janissaries, eyeing her grandson Mehmed as a puppet ruler. Ironic, the woman who dragged Ibrahim from the cafes now seals his doom. Horror, Istanbul's poor, caught in the uprising, face slaughter as Janissaries torch markets, their rage indiscriminate. Ibrahim's final harem antics are grotesque. He stages a sultan's hunt, chasing concubines through Topkapi's courtyards with a crossbow, now loaded with real bolts. One girl, a Circassian named Layla, is shot in the shoulder. She's exiled, bleeding, to a frontier outpost. Absurd, a game where love is lethal. Pain, Layla, abandoned, died of fever, her family erased from records to hide the scandal. The cat obsession spirals. Ibrahim's lion of the palace gets a diamond collar, but when it scratches a vizier, Ibrahim orders the man's hand cut off. The vizier, a loyalist, bleeds out, his family banished. Sarcastic nudge, a cat ruling an empire's fate. Horror, that family, once noble, joins Istanbul's beggar hordes, dodging plague and rioters. Politically, the empire's a carcass. The Venetian war drags on, with Crete half lost. Ibrahim, advised by a new quack vizier, Suleiman Pasha, taxes mosques to fund harem renovations. The move sparks outrage. Imams preach rebellion, calling Ibrahim the devil's shadow. He retaliates, banning Friday prayers in rebel mosques. Ironic, a Muslim sultan waging war on his faith. Pain, worshippers caught praying, face flogging, their mosques boarded up, faith itself a crime. Engaging you folks, what's the wildest way you'd rebel against a mad ruler? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if you'd outwit Ibrahim's Janissaries. The end comes swift. On August 8, 1648, the Janissaries, backed by Qasim and the Mufti, storm Topkapi. Ibrahim, drunk and raving, barricades himself in his fur-lined chamber, clutching his favorite cat. The rebels break in, dragging him to the throne room. The Mufti reads the fatwa. Ibrahim is deposed, his son Mehmed IV, age 6, crowned in his place. Ibrahim screams, cursing his mother, but the executioner's bowstring silences him. Strangled at 32, his body's dumped in an unmarked grave. Absurdity, a sultan killed by his own legacy. Horror, Qasim, weeping, secures her grandson's throne, but the empire's scars run deep. Rebellions, famine, and war linger. The harem's fate? Shivakar and Dilshah are exiled to the old palace, their wealth stripped. Humasha, mother of Mehmed IV, rises as Valide Sultan, but her son's reign inherits Ibrahim's chaos. The women, once pawns in his games, face obscurity or death, their stories erased. Pain, hundreds of lives snuffed or shattered for a sultan's fleeting lust. The empire staggers on. Crete's war drags until 1669, costing thousands of lives. Taxes ease, but plague and poverty persist. Ibrahim's legacy? A cautionary tale of power unchecked, lust unbound. His fur-lined rooms decay, his cats scatter, but the Bosphorus still whispers of drowned concubines. Ironic, a ruler meant to unite, tearing all apart. Let's tie it up with a specific horror. In his final days, Ibrahim, hallucinating from potions, ordered a harem girl, Fatima, to fly from a balcony to prove her love. She jumped, breaking both legs. He laughed, then forgot her. She died in a palace infirmary, unmourned. Absurd, love as a lethal stunt. Pain, Fatima's family, enslaved, never learned her fate. The aftermath, Mehmed IV, scarred by his father's violence, rules under Qasim's iron grip, but the empire's cracks widen. Janissary revolts, Venetian losses, and economic ruin haunt the Ottomans for decades. Ibrahim's madness wasn't just personal, it was a contagion that sickened a civilization. Closing this saga, Ibrahim the Mad's reign was a grotesque tapestry of lust, lunacy, and loss. The absurdity of a fur-obsessed sultan, the irony of a holy ruler defiling his faith, the pain of subjects crushed by his desires. These are his true relics. As we leave this nightmare, reflect, power corrupts, but madness destroys. Thanks for riding this wild wave. Comment below. What's the one crazy thing you'd do as Sultan for a day? Let's end with a laugh and a chill. Imagine this, a German princess turned Russian empress, ruling with an iron fist wrapped in velvet, but behind the grandeur lurks a woman whose personal quirks could make even the hardiest courtier gag. Catherine the Great, enlightened despot or queen of the grotesque. Stick around as we unearth her top 5 revolting habits, laced with absurdity, pain, and enough sarcasm to topple a throne. If that hooks you, comment below. What's the grossest royal secret you've heard? Let's dive into this imperial nightmare. Oh, the 18th century. A time when Europe was a playground for powdered wigs, palace intrigues, and hygiene so optional it could kill you. Enter Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst, better known as Catherine the Great, who clawed her way from minor German nobility to the pinnacle of Russian power. Born in 1729 to a cash-strapped prince and a scheming mother, little Sophie wasn't destined for greatness, she was engineered for it. Her mom, Johanna, dragged her across Europe like a prize pony, sniffing out royal matches. And boy, did she find one. A match made in hell. At 14, Sophie met her future husband, the future Peter III, a pockmarked toy soldier-obsessed drunkard who preferred Prussian uniforms to his own bed. Irony alert. This girl from nowhere would overthrow him, rule for 34 years, and expand Russia into an empire, all while indulging in habits that would make modern tabloids blush. But survival in the past? Pure agony. Imagine smallpox scars, blood-soaked battlefields, and winters so cold your eyelashes freeze shut. Catherine navigated this chaos with wit, will, and a dash of debauchery. Sarcasm incoming. Thanks Enlightenment for giving us philosophers while royals wallowed in their own filth. Let's kick off our top 5 with habit number 1, her insatiable sexual appetite and parade of lovers. Ah, yes, the Scarlet Empress, whispered about as the Messalina of the Neva, a nymphomaniac who allegedly needed 6 romps a day just to cure her insomnia. Picture the scene. St. Petersburg's Winter Palace, opulent halls echoing with moans while peasants starved outside. Catherine didn't just have affairs, she institutionalized them. From 1752 to her death in 1796, she cycled through at least 12 official lovers, young, strapping military men who doubled as political pawns. First up, Sergei Saltykov, a chamberlain who fathered her son Paul, or did he? Peter III was too busy playing dolls to notice. Then Grigory Orlov, the coup master who helped dethrone her hubby, rewarded with titles and treasures. Absurdity piles on. While Europe preached virtue, Catherine flipped the script, using sex as statecraft. But the pain? In an era where syphilis ravaged courts like wildfire, every liaison was a gamble with death. Lovers discarded like yesterday's borscht, hearts broken, egos crushed. One jilted beau, Alexander Lanskoy, died young. Poison? Grief? Who knows? But Catherine mourned like a widow, building him a mausoleum grander than some czars got. Sarcastic nudge. Nothing says romance like risking the pox for power. Comment time. If you were Catherine, would you risk it all for a hot officer? Spill in the comments. Diving deeper into this habit's absurdity, consider the court dynamics. Catherine's Russia was a pressure cooker of plots, where a wrong glance could mean Siberia or the scaffold. Her lovers weren't just bed warmers, they were buffers against isolation. Take Grigory Potemkin, her longest flame, ugly as sin but brilliant. He rose from aide-de-camp to prince, masterminding wars and annexations. Their letters, steamy novels in ink, blending politics with pillow talk. Yet, the pain of survival lurks. Potemkin battled depression, eye infections from dusty campaigns, and the constant fear of falling from favor. Catherine, too, endured. Childbirth in secret, rumors questioning her heir's legitimacy. Paul, her son, grew up resenting her, convinced he was Peter's true heir, not some lover's spawn. Historical absurdity. While Voltaire praised her as enlightened, rivals spread tales of orgies, painting her as a voracious vixen. Truth? She was pragmatic, using affection to secure loyalty in a man's world. But oh, the toll. Ex-lovers exiled, executed, or enriched, all while she balanced budgets and borders. Imagine the exhaustion. Ruling by day, romancing by night, all in corsets that could crush ribs. Survival's bitter joke. Power demands everything, even your soul. Shifting gears, but staying in the bedroom's shadow. Habit number 2. The erotic furniture collection that would make Freud blush. Yes, you heard right. Catherine allegedly commissioned a secret boudoir crammed with X-rated decor, where a table sported phallic legs, chairs carved with vulvae, and walls adorned with pornographic art straight from Pompeii's ruins. Discovered by Nazi soldiers in 1941 amid the rubble of her Ghecina palace, photos show this cabinet of curiosities before bombs obliterated it. Irony supreme. The enlightened empress, pen pal to Voltaire, hiding a smut museum behind locked doors. Was it real? Historians debate. Some say Nazi propaganda. Others point to her libertine tastes. But assume it existed, picture Catherine, post-coup stress, reclining on a throne etched with explicit scenes, sipping tea amid gilded genitals. Absurd, right? In an age when women were chattel, she flipped the patriarchy, collecting erotica like stamps. Pain factor. 18th century Russia was no picnic. Serfs toiled in mud while she indulged. Building such furniture? Craftsmen risked flogging if caught. Materials smuggled, secrets guarded by threats. One wrong whisper and heads rolled. Literally. Sarcasm drips. Nothing empowers like a dick-shaped desk, especially when your empire's peasants revolt over taxes. Let's humanize the horror. Catherine arrived in Russia at 15, renamed, rebaptized Orthodox, her German roots erased like a bad dream. Survival meant adaptation. Learning Russian, charming Elizabeth, enduring Peter's incompetence. Her erotic escapades? Perhaps rebellion against a loveless marriage. Peter, scarred by smallpox, preferred hunting dogs to her bed. Leaving her isolated, yearning, lovers filled the void. But at what cost? Jealous courtiers plotted, spreading nymphomaniac slurs that outlived her. The furniture tale amplifies this, a private defiance, yet fodder for enemies. During World War II, those photos fueled propaganda, painting her as degenerate. Pain's echo. Generations of women rulers smeared as sluts, their achievements buried under bedroom myths. Comment prompt. Does Catherine's alleged collection shock or empower you? Drop your take below. Building on the absurdity, imagine the logistics. Sourcing artifacts from Pompeii, diplomats dodging Ottoman spies, crates hidden in hay wagons, craftsmen carving under candlelight, fearing Elizabeth's wrath. The old empress, pious yet promiscuous herself, would have scorched earth. Catherine's pain, balancing enlightenment with excess. She founded schools, vaccinated against smallpox, first on herself, brave or reckless. Yet whispers of her playroom undermined it all. Historical joke. While she partitioned Poland, rivals joked she'd partition lovers too. Survival's grind, endless audiences, quelling Cossack uprisings like Pugachev's, where rebels impersonated Peter III, claiming she murdered him. Spoiler, she probably did via Orlov's hands. Blood on her throne, yet she partied on. Teaser, if this habit's wild, wait for the foot-tickling fetish. Engage now, pause if needed, but comment, which habit so far grosses you out more, the lovers or the furniture? Your votes shape part 2. Wrapping this chunk, Catherine's habits weren't just personal, they were political dynamite. In a world where kings bedded mistresses without blink, her agency sparked scandals. Pain of the past. Women like her walked razors, one misstep to ruin. Absurdity. From Beringia migrants to this empress, history's a circus of survival. Teaser for part 2. Foot ticklers and bloodbaths await. Hit like if hooked, subscribe for more. Comment your wildest guess for habit 3. Alright, you're back for more of Catherine the Great's revolting habits, where the line between empress and eccentric blurs into a glorious mess of 18th century madness. If part 1's parade of lovers and X-rated furniture didn't make you clutch your pearls, buckle up. This dive into her next grotesque quirks will. We're peeling back the velvet curtains of her reign with a smirk, exposing habits so absurd they'd make a Cossack blush. Drop a comment. What's the most unhinged royal habit you've ever heard of? Let's plunge into part 2 of this sarcastic, pain-soaked saga, where survival in Imperial Russia feels like a fever dream. We left off with Catherine's bedroom antics and her alleged pornographic furniture, a combo that screamed, "I'm enlightened, but make it spicy." Now, let's roll into habit number 3, her obsession with foot tickling and bizarre court rituals. Picture the Winter Palace, 1760s, glittering with chandeliers, while Catherine, the mastermind of Russia's expansion, hosts intimate evenings where courtiers are summoned to tickle her feet. Yes, you heard that right. Her Imperial Majesty, conqueror of Crimea, had a thing for having her toes teased by giggling attendants. Historical whispers like those in the salacious secret memoirs of the court of St. Petersburg claim she'd recline on a divan, silk stockings off, while young nobles competed to make her laugh. Irony alert. While Voltaire's praising her as the Semiramis of the North, she's giggling like a schoolgirl over ticklish arches. Absurdity? Off the charts. In a court where one wrong word meant exile to Siberia, imagine the terror of being the guy who tickled too hard, or not hard enough. Pains in the power dynamic. These weren't optional games. Refuse the Empress's quirky request and you're on a one-way sled to the gulag. Sarcasm drips. Nothing says absolute power like forcing a duke to play footsie while serfs freeze outside. Let's unpack the scene. Catherine, now in her 30s, has survived a loveless marriage, a coup, and whispers of illegitimacy around her son Paul. She's rewriting Russia's laws, modernizing the army, but at night, it's foot-tickling hour. Courtiers, powdered wigs askew, sweat through their velvet coats, praying they hit the right spot. One slip, a scratch instead of a tickle, and you're out of favor, maybe out of a head. The absurdity's layered. This is the woman who vaccinated herself against smallpox, a medical pioneer, yet she's indulging in rituals that sound like a fevered court jester's fanfic. Pains in the survival. For Catherine, these quirks were control, a way to keep her court off balance, loyal through fear and flattery. For the ticklers, humiliation, their noble pride crushed under her imperial souls. Historical gossip, exaggerated, sure, claims she'd reward the best ticklers with estates while failures got the cold shoulder. Imagine the stakes. Your family's fortune hinges on your feather technique. Comment, would you risk Siberia for a shot at tickling royalty? Drop your answer below. Now let's pivot to habit number 4, her questionable hygiene practices or lack thereof. The 18th century wasn't exactly a golden age for cleanliness. Baths were suspicious and perfume was the deodorant of choice. But Catherine? She took rustic charm to new lows. Diaries from her ladies-in-waiting, like Countess Dashkova's, hint that the Empress bathed irregularly, maybe once a month if the stars aligned. Instead, she doused herself in rose water and wore wigs so caked with powder they could double as snowballs. Irony supreme. The woman who brought Enlightenment ideas to Russia, championing science, lived in a body that smelled like a mix of sweat, vodka, and ambition. Absurdity hits hard. While she's writing to Diderot about philosophy, her court's choking on the stench of unwashed royalty. Pains in the context, bathing was risky, cold water, no germ theory, and palaces were drafty death traps. Catherine's sporadic dips in the Neva River? More ritual than hygiene, done to prove her Russianness to a skeptical court. Meanwhile, her serfs, toiling in mud, had better odds of staying clean. Sarcastic jab. Nothing screams divine right like ruling an empire while smelling like a stable. Zoom in on the nightmare. Catherine's early years in Russia were a crash course in survival. Arriving at 15, she faced Empress Elizabeth's paranoia and Peter's neglect. Hygiene took a back seat to scheming. Bathing meant stripping in front of spies disguised as maids, risking gossip or assassination. So she leaned on perfume, heavy makeup, and gowns that hid stains. But the pain wasn't just hers. Her attendants, forced to endure her odor, couldn't complain. Imagine holding your breath while pinning her wig, praying you don't faint. Courtiers wrote of palace miasmas, a polite way of saying the air was a biohazard. Absurdity, she's annexing Poland, reforming laws, but her bedroom smells like a battlefield latrine. And the risk? Infections were rampant. Smallpox, typhus, you name it. Catherine's smallpox vaccination in 1768 was bold, but her daily hygiene? A gamble with fate. One courtier's diary mentions a fever she ignored, nearly dying in 1765. Survival's cost, power demanded she project invincibility, even if it meant stewing in her own juices. Let's humanize this. Picture Anna, a fictional maid in Catherine's service, 1764. She's 19, plucked from a village, now dodging the Empress's moods and the stench of her unwashed linens. Anna's job? Change the bed sheets, weekly, if lucky, while avoiding eye contact. Irony, Anna's village had a stream for washing. The palace has golden chamber pots, but no plumbing. Pain, she catches a rash from handling soiled gowns, no doctor in sight. Catherine, meanwhile, writes manifestos, oblivious to Anna's struggle. The Empress's hygiene lapses weren't just personal. They were a microcosm of a society where serfs died for elite whims. Historical gossip, like the banned anecdotes of the Russian court, exaggerated her filth, claiming she bathed in wine to stay youthful. Truth? She didn't, but the myth fed her legend as a decadent despot. Sarcasm. Cheers to ruling with a scent that could fell an ox. Tying these habits together, Catherine's quirks were survival tactics in a brutal world. Foot tickling, a power play, keeping courtiers submissive. Poor hygiene, a necessity when baths could kill and trust was scarce. But the absurdity's glaring. She's a feminist icon, seizing a throne in a man's world, yet her habits scream chaos. Pains in the stakes, one misstep, a lover's betrayal, a fever from filth, and her empire crumbles. Her 1762 coup against Peter III, backed by Orlov's muscle, was a gamble that paid off. But the stress? Relentless. Pugachev's rebellion in 1773, with serfs claiming he was Peter reborn, nearly toppled her. She crushed it, but the fear lingered, her habits a shield against collapse. Engage time. Pause if you need to process that foot-tickling image, but comment. Which is grosser, Catherine's tickle fetish or her anti-bathing stance? Your vote fuels part 3. As we wrap this chunk, Catherine's revolting habits reveal a woman juggling genius and grotesquerie. In a world where survival meant outsmarting assassins, her quirks were armor. Weird, smelly armor. Teaser. Part 3 dives into her darkest habit yet. Think blood and betrayal. Hit like if you're hooked, subscribe for more, and comment, what's your guess for habit 5? Let's keep this imperial circus rolling. You're back for the third act of Catherine the Great's revolting habits, where the Empress of Russia proves that ruling an empire and grossing out her court can go hand in hand. If her lover parade, naughty furniture, foot-tickling fetish, and questionable hygiene from parts 1 and 2 didn't make you wince, brace for the finale's darkest twist. We're diving deep into the muck of 18th century power plays with a smirk, uncovering a habit so grim it'll make you question her enlightened crown. Comment now. What's the nastiest royal rumor you've stumbled across? Let's wade into this sarcastic, pain-drenched saga, where survival in Imperial Russia is a grotesque tightrope walk. We're in the thick of Catherine's reign, 1770s, where she's juggling wars, reforms, and a court full of schemers who'd rather poison her tea than toast her health. She's expanded Russia's borders, snagged Crimea, and penned laws that sound progressive until you remember the serfs toiling in misery. But behind the gilded facade, her habits reveal a woman who thrived on control, even if it meant embracing the macabre. Enter habit number 5, her alleged fascination with judicial brutality and public punishments. Oh yes, the enlightened empress, darling of Voltaire, had a taste for the gruesome spectacle of state-sanctioned violence. Picture Street, Petersburg's public squares, 1774, during Pugachev's rebellion, a peasant uprising led by a Cossack claiming to be the resurrected Peter III. Catherine, fresh off crushing this revolt, didn't just execute rebels, she made it a theater of horror. Pugachev's head was lopped off, his limbs quartered, displayed on spikes for all to see. Historical accounts, like those in the Russian Chronicle, Note she approved such displays, ensuring crowds witnessed the cost of defiance. Irony alert, the woman who wrote about justice in her Nakaz legal code relished punishments that'd make a guillotine blush. Absurdity? Sky high. While she's corresponding with Diderot about human rights, she's greenlighting executions that turn Moscow into a medieval horror show. Pains in the execution, literally. Rebels, often serfs who dared dream of freedom, faced whips, brands, and gallows, their screams a warning to others. Sarcasm drips. Nothing says progress like a public dismemberment to keep the peasants in line. Let's set the scene. Catherine's court is a glittering cage where loyalty's bought with fear. Pugachev's rebellion, 1773-74, wasn't just a nuisance, it nearly toppled her. Thousands of serfs, Cossacks, and outcasts rallied behind a man claiming to be her dead husband, whom she'd conveniently retired via coup in 1762. Her response? Brutal. Court records show she ordered 36,000 rebels punished, flogged, branded, exiled, or worse. Public squares became slaughterhouses with knouts, whips studded with metal, tearing flesh to ribbons. Catherine didn't always watch, but she didn't need to. Her approval was enough. Absurdity piles on. She's vaccinating Russia against smallpox while sanctioning torture that'd make surgeons faint. Pain's visceral. Imagine a serf, Ivan, dragged from his village for joining Pugachev. He's whipped until his back's raw, branded with a hot iron, then sent to Siberian mines, his family left to starve. Catherine's habit wasn't just witnessing brutality, it was orchestrating it as policy. Her survival depended on it. One soft moment, and the throne's hers no more. Sarcastic jab, cheers to enlightened despotism, where reform means better ways to break bones. Zooming in, this habit's roots trace to her early years. Arriving in Russia at 15, Sophie, now Catherine, learned fast. Power's a bloody game. Empress Elizabeth, her predecessor, taught her the ropes. Public punishments kept nobles and serfs in check. Catherine, a German outsider, had to out-Russian the Russians to secure her crown. Post-coup, with Peter III dead, Orlov brothers, anyone? She faced constant threats, pretenders, plots, whispers of illegitimacy around her son Paul. Judicial brutality was her shield, a message carved in blood. Cross me, and you're next. Historical gossip, like the banned memoirs of a courtier, claims she once inspected a torture chamber, curious about the knout's efficiency. Exaggerated? Maybe, but her edicts preserved in Sunot. Petersburg archives show no mercy, rebels' tongues cut out, noses slit, bodies left for crows. Irony? She's penning enlightened manifestos while signing death warrants. Pains in the human cost. Entire villages razed, families torn apart, survivors scarred physically and mentally. Comment: would you have bowed to Catherine's brutal justice or joined Pugachev's doomed fight? Drop your take below. Let's humanize the horror. Picture Maria, a fictional serf's daughter, 1774, watching her father flogged in a snowy square. He joined Pugachev, dreaming of freedom from landowners who treated him like cattle. Now, Maria sees him broken, his screams drowned by jeering crowds. Catherine, miles away, signs the order, her quill scratching as she plans a ballet. Absurdity. Maria's father dies for a rebellion sparked by Catherine's own policies. Serfdom's chokehold, taxes crushing the poor. Pain's generational. Maria grows up orphaned, her village a ghost town, her hatred for the empress simmering. Yet, Catherine's untouched, her throne secure. Historical whispers amplify this. French diplomats wrote of her cold delight in punishing traitors, a myth that stuck. Truth? She was pragmatic, not sadistic, but the body count didn't lie. Survival's cost. To rule, she became the monster her enemies feared. Tying this to her other habits, Catherine's brutality was the grim flip side of her eccentricities. Lovers kept her sane. Foot tickling kept her court submissive. Poor hygiene was a survival quirk in a germ-ridden world. But judicial violence? That was power raw and bloody. Absurdity. She's hailed as a feminist icon, yet her reign rested on crushing the powerless. Pain. Every execution tightened her grip, but widened the gap between her and the Russia she claimed to love. Pugachev's revolt wasn't just a rebellion. It was a cry from serfs who saw her reforms, schools, hospitals as elite luxuries. Her response? Crush them, display their corpses, move on. Sarcasm. Nothing unites an empire like a good old-fashioned beheading. Let's not ignore the context. The 18th century was brutal. France guillotined, England hanged, but Catherine's Russia scaled it up. Her wars with the Ottomans and Poles filled coffers but drained lives. A 1775 edict exiled 20,000 rebels to Siberia. Many died en route, frozen in shackles. DNA wouldn't tell this story, too recent for genetic scars, but the cultural trauma lingers. Modern Russian folklore still curses Pugachev's defeat, a wound Catherine's spectacle deepened. Irony, her enlightenment inspired revolutions elsewhere, but at home, she crushed dissent with medieval flair. Pains in the survivors. Families like Maria's, scattered, silenced, their stories buried until historians dug them up. Engage now. Pause if that execution image hit hard, but comment. Does Catherine's brutality shock you, or was it just 18th century business as usual? Your vote shapes Part 4. As we close this chunk, Catherine's fifth habit reveals a ruler who mastered survival through fear. From lovers to torture, her quirks were weapons in a world where weakness meant death. Teaser. Part 4 wraps her legacy, how these habits shaped Russia and haunt us today. Hit like if you're hooked, subscribe for the finale, and comment, what's your guess on how her revolting habits echo in 2025? Let's keep this bloody circus rolling. You've stuck with us through the grotesque carnival of Catherine the Great's revolting habits. Lovers on parade, X-rated furniture, foot-tickling fetishes, dubious hygiene, and a blood-soaked penchant for public punishments. If those didn't make you gag, welcome to the grand finale, where we wrap her legacy with a smirk, tracing how her quirks shaped Russia and still ripple through history. Drop a comment. Which of Catherine's habits shocked you most, and why? Let's dive into Part 4, a sarcastic, pain-laced romp through the aftermath of her reign, where survival's absurdity meets imperial ghosts in 2025. Catherine's 34-year rule, ending with her death in 1796, transformed Russia into a global powerhouse. Crimea annexed, Poland partitioned, Enlightenment ideas sprinkled like glitter over a serfdom-soaked empire. But her revolting habits? They weren't just quirks, they were the scaffolding of her survival, propping up a throne in a world that chewed up outsiders. Born Sophie in 1729, a minor German princess, she clawed her way to power through a coup, outsmarting a court of vipers and a husband who'd rather play with toy soldiers than rule. Her habits, lascivious, bizarre, brutal, were her armor. But oh, the irony. The enlightened empress who corresponded with Voltaire left a legacy as tangled as her bedsheets. Pains in the paradox. She modernized Russia while chaining millions to serfdom, her reforms a shiny veneer over a rotting system. Sarcasm alert. Nothing screams progress like expanding an empire on the backs of peasants who'd sell their kids for a crust of bread. Let's rewind to tie her habits together. Her insatiable lover parade, Saltykov, Orlov, Potemkin, wasn't just lust, it was politics. Each man was a chess piece, securing military or noble loyalty. The erotic furniture? A private rebellion against a court that judged her every move, though its exposure, real or not, fueled her scandalous myth. Foot tickling? A power play, humiliating courtiers into submission while she giggled. Poor hygiene? A survival tactic in a germ-infested era where bathing could mean pneumonia. And judicial brutality? Her iron fist ensuring no Pugachev-style revolt ever threatened her again. Absurdity piles high. Catherine, the feminist icon who seized a man's throne, ruled with habits that'd make modern HR faint. Pains in the cost. Her survival meant others suffering. Serfs flayed, lovers discarded, maids like our fictional Anna choking on palace stench. Historical gossip, like the secret memoirs of the Russian court, painted her as a debauched tyrant, but truth's messier. She was a pragmatist wielding vice and violence to hold an empire together. Comment, which habit do you think was her smartest survival move? Drop your pick below. Now let's fast forward to her death, November 1796. Catherine, 67, collapses. Stroke. Not the apocryphal horse incident. Sorry, Mythbusters. Her son, Paul, takes the throne, bitter and vengeful, undoing her reforms like a petulant kid burning her playbook. Irony, her own heir dismantles her legacy, proving her paranoia about him was spot on. Pains in the fallout. Paul's erratic rule sparks plots ending with his assassination in 1801. Catherine's habits, her lovers, her brutality left a court so unstable it imploded. Her grandson Alexander I inherits a Russia shaped by her contradictions. Educated elites, enslaved peasants, and a bureaucracy as corrupt as it was grand. Absurdity. She's hailed as Russia's Golden Age architect, yet her serf policies fueled rebellions that'd haunt the Romanovs until 1917. Zooming out, let's trace her habits' echoes. Her lover system set a precedent. Russian rulers post-Catherine kept favorites, blending bedroom and boardroom. Potemkin's descendants, enriched by her favor, became 19th century power players. But the pain? Her lovers' families faced exile or disgrace when favor faded. Orlov's brothers, for instance, were sidelined, their loyalty worthless without her breath. Her erotic furniture tale, whether true or Nazi propaganda, cemented her as history's Scarlet Empress. Modern Russia still grapples with her myth. TV dramas like Ekaterina glamorize her, glossing over the serfs who died for her wars. Sarcasm. Thanks, pop culture, for making tyranny sexy. Her hygiene lapses reflect the era's grim reality. 18th century Russia lacked plumbing, even palaces were cesspools. Catherine's rosewater dousing was standard, but her maids suffered most. Rashes, infections, no sick leave. Fast forward to 2025. Russian museums display her gowns, pristine now, but silent on the stench. Irony. She championed smallpox vaccination, saving thousands, yet her personal filth risked her own life. Pains in the disparity. While she wrote to Diderot, serfs died of typhus in hovels. Her legacy? A healthcare push that outlived her, but only for the elite. The foot-tickling ritual, absurd as it sounds, was pure control. By making nobles play jester, she kept them loyal, or terrified. This trickled down. Later czars used humiliation to tame courts, a tactic echoing in Russia's rigid hierarchies today. Pains in the courtier's shame, noble blood reduced to tickling toes, their dignity a casualty of her whims. Historical accounts, like Dashkova's memoirs, hint at resentment. Courtiers plotted, but none dared strike. Absurdity. Catherine's giggle fests secured her throne better than any army. Her judicial brutality, though, casts the longest shadow. Pugachev's rebellion, crushed with heads on pikes, set a template for Russian repression. The 1775 edict exiling 20,000 rebels to Siberia birthed a penal system that had defined Russia. Think gulags, think Stalin. Irony supreme. Her nakaz preached justice, but her knouts spoke louder. Pains generational. Serf families, like our fictional Marias, were shattered, their trauma seeping into Russian folklore. In 2025, Pugachev's name still sparks debate. Hero or traitor? Catherine's brutality framed him as the latter, but modern historians see her as the villain. Comment: do you see Catherine as a monster or a product of her time? Spill your thoughts. Let's humanize the legacy. Picture Ivan, a serf's grandson in 1796, now a soldier in Catherine's army. His DNA carries the weight of her wars. His father died in the Ottoman campaign. His mother starved under serfdom's yoke. Ivan worships Catherine, the mother of Russia, yet her policies keep him bound. Irony, she's his savior and oppressor, her reforms distant dreams. Pain, he'll die in her service, never tasting her enlightenment. In 2025, his descendants visit Moscow museums, marveling at her portraits, unaware of his blood on her hands. Sarcasm, long live the Empress, whose legacy shines brighter than the graves she filled. In 2025, Catherine's habits haunt Russia's psyche. Her lover-fueled diplomacy inspired Putin's inner circle. Loyalty bought with favor, not trust. Her brutality echoes in authoritarian crackdowns. Her Enlightenment dreams fuel Russia's cultural pride. But the pain lingers. Rural poverty, a serfdom remnant, plagues post-Soviet Russia. Absurdity. She's a feminist hero, yet her serf policies entrenched inequality. DNA studies can't trace her impact, but cultural scars, distrust, hierarchy, persist. Engage now, pause to digest, then comment. How do Catherine's habits change your view of her legacy? Hero, villain, or both? As we close, Catherine's revolting habits were her survival kit. Love, filth, cruelty, control. They built an empire but broke millions. Her ghost looms in 2025, A reminder that power's price is paid in blood. Final call, comment your favorite habit, hit like, subscribe, and let's keep history's circus alive.